here I need to look up. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for making it out here this morning to this beautiful building. My name is Carter Barrett. I'm the chairman of this committee, and I'm delighted to see so many new friends here and friends we've already made before in some of our earlier meetings. Honored that I know some of you drove quite a way to get here too, so thank y'all for doing that. I'm going to turn our meeting over to the esteemed Representative Lynn Hefner because she is from Augusta and I have such great regard for her. I'm going to ask her to be the MC this morning for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to my esteemed colleague, Chairman Carter Barrett. Thank you. And thank you all so much for being here. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to our host, Augusta University and the Georgia Cyber Center, for graciously allowing us to use this space, giving us all of the technical accommodations so that we could all hear and see. I think this is the best setup we've had for all of our session meetings. I'm so glad you got here, Teddy, for this part because I wanted to make sure that you knew we did this better than Columbus did, okay? Wanted to make sure you heard that part. But again, thank you all for being here. My distinguished colleague from the Augusta delegation, Representative Carlton Howard, who's going to do our invocation in just a moment. Also, I could not let this moment go past without acknowledging the first gentleman of Augusta, Mr. James Hefner, my husband, thanking him for allowing me to be here this morning. So we'd like to get started with Representative Carlton Howard. If you'd like to come up and do the invocation for us, I will allow the chairman and vice chair to go ahead and conduct our meeting.
Let us pray together. God, we're grateful today for this.
Sir, so I didn't know, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to allow everybody else to introduce themselves. This is a little bit different crew, so I'll stand down and let you do that.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Representative Rob Clifton. I'm born and raised in this area. I represent District 131 in Columbia County. Very happy to be here to hear and learn more as we continue through the study committee.
Good morning. My name is Vance Smith. I live in Harris County. I represent about 80% of that county. Some of you may know that's where Callaway Gardens is located. So I was born and raised there. Also represent part of Columbus, Georgia, which is Muskogee County, and about 40% of Troup County, where LaGrange, Georgia is located. Happy to be with y'all. This is our third meeting. It's been real informative, and just glad to be on the panel. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brock Perry. I'm the help. I'm the attorney analyst with the House Budget Research Office. There's a reason they didn't give me a microphone because I am to be seen and not heard. I appreciate everybody for being here.
He keeps trying to get himself out of that by saying things like I don't have a microphone, but we all turn back to Brock when we get off track. So I'm Carter Barrett, and I'm a native Augustan. I'm so happy to be back home for this meeting today. I live in North Atlanta. I represent House District 24. Just so proud to serve Georgia. My grandfather was the pastor at First Presbyterian Church here in downtown Augusta for many years. So I'm just delighted to be back home. I'm proud to serve as the vice chairman of higher education, which is that's why it's fun for me to be here with Augusta State today. And I'm just proud to be with y'all, so thank y'all.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. I'm Representative Teddy Reese from Columbus, Georgia, and it is truly and honored to be in such hostile territory this morning. But thankful it's still the state of Georgia. And so, no, I'm truly honored to be here amongst many of my esteemed colleagues that I hold to the highest of regards. Representative Howard, good to see you, my brother. Sit right behind me on the House floor, and so we get an opportunity to chat all session long, and it is truly a treat. We are just fortunate to have such great representation from the Augusta area, including our host today and even some of the representatives from the surrounding area. But we're here for a very, very important topic. This is our third meeting, as Mr. Chairman said. I serve as the vice chairman of this committee, and we are looking forward to the conversation today and the totality of the work that will come together from the conclusion of our meeting. So thank each of you for being here with us today. We cannot provide the input of the residents of the state of Georgia without your presence. So we're honored that you're here with us. We look forward to the conversation, look forward to the information that we receive so that we can do the work for the people of the state of Georgia. So thank you. Good morning.
Quick little bit of background information for people who have not been to a previous meeting. We've had 3 meetings today. We have our first meeting in July in Atlanta at the Capitol. Our second meeting was in Columbus last month, and this is our third meeting. And of course, after we adjourn today, we've been gathering lots and lots of information. And after we adjourn this meeting today, we'll be spending a lot of time together between now and the end of the year trying to look at the things we think we need to consider with regard to the legitimation process. What we obviously have learned is that in Georgia, there are obviously a significant number of children who are born to unmarried mothers out of wedlock. And about 46.3% of the children born in Georgia are out of wedlock per the CDC this year. You know, we all know that a child born to a married couple is automatically considered to be legitimate. But under Georgia law, if the child's parents are not married at the time of the birth, the father has no legal or parental rights. In Georgia, obviously, an unmarried father has to petition the court for legitimation, and this process establishes him as the legal father with rights to custody and visitation. So we've obviously gotten a good fundamental baseline. We've had a lot of subject matter experts come and present to us to help us get to that time on the history of how we got to where we are today, what the law was up until 2005 or 6, how it was changed in 2016 on the administrative legitimation process, and then how and the whole purpose of this meeting is to come up with a real understanding, and we're not here just to visit. We're here to look and see if there's meaningful improvements that can be made to the legislation. So that's our baseline. Without much further ado today, we're gonna jump right in and go to our speakers so we can hear your thoughts. Last thing we always have the microphones turned around. We do too much talking as politicians. We need to do more listening, but this is just a great committee. I've been honored to work with them, and this is a group that is absolutely committed to effective change. So thank you guys for being here.
Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege, we do have another representative who has joined us, Representative L.C. Miles, who also represents parts of Augusta. Thank you. You want to say a few words real quick? Anything? Greeting?
Good morning. I'd just like to welcome y'all to Augusta, and I really appreciate the committee coming down. The work you're doing is really, really something that's really deep in Augusta and the rest of the state of Georgia. So we're glad to see you here and had a good time with you last night. Thank you.
Okay, and Representative Miles is one of the newest members of the Georgia House of Representatives, right? Yes, sir. Welcome. So without further ado, we want to get started. Is Catrell Nash in? Catrell, good morning.
Is this thing on? Okay, awesome. I'm going to treat this room like I would a courtroom, if that's okay with everybody. I want to first and foremost just thank Chairman Barrett for being here and the committee, as well as Representative Hefner for inviting me to speak. My name is Catrell Nash. I am a local attorney here in Augusta. I've been practicing law come November the 4th, 16 years. And I've been doing family law for almost about 10 years, and that includes heavily the legitimation process. And essentially, what I've been asked to talk about is just some of my experiences as an attorney representing fathers in the legitimation process and things that I see as barriers to fathers legitimating their children, and furthermore, some suggestions or recommendations that myself as a member of this local community, as a bar member, would have and how we can improve those conditions. And the way that I want to go about doing that is talking to you all about two cases that I've had. They're both closed. I'm not going to refer to names, but I'm just going to give you a broad, stroke of what I was handling in those cases. So the first case involved a father who had a daughter, and he had been involved in his daughter's life up until she was about 6 years old. So from birth to 6 years old. And then something happened. He made some very bad decisions. And unfortunately, there were consequences for those decisions that resulted in him involuntarily having to be parted from his daughter. So once he completes that punishment, he comes out, he reconnects with the mother, and he attempts to basically rebuild his relationship with his daughter. Very abruptly, the mother decides, you don't actually have rights to our daughter, and so I don't want to have contact with you, and I don't want you to have contact with our daughter. So at this point, the daughter is about 8 years old, going on 9. Dad's been away total about 2 years, give or take. So what ends up happening? Well, Dad comes and he sees me. And I tell him that, hey, you have to go through the legitimation process. And I tell him what my fee for representation is. And as you can imagine, he had a mini heart attack in my office. But that's the reality of a lot of fathers, is that if they're trying to understand how do I establish legal rights, your first thought is to see an attorney. And there is sticker shock when you realize that we're not very inexpensive. So what this father does is he goes and he has not just one but 2 jobs. And it takes him about 8 months, but he raises the money to be able to hire me to represent him. So you would think that by this point, now that he's got me, an attorney in the case, that makes it so much easier. This is going to be an easy peasy situation. It's not. Because now mom has moved. And so the sheriff's office, anytime you file a case in your local superior court for a petition for legitimation, one of the things you absolutely have to do under the law is you've got to serve the mother or the guardian of the child. Well, you have to know where to find that person so that the sheriff's deputy can make sure that they are served the paperwork, they're put on notice about the proceeding, and they have an opportunity to be heard as well on whether or not that legitimation should be granted. Well, we tried everything. We used, legal research, search engines. We even had to hire a private investigator because the sheriff's office has a rule or a policy that they'll try 2 or 3 times. They'll even try a phone number, but only they can do so much as well. And so we put in, let's just say, about $500 into a private investigator, and we still could not find the mother. So the case just lingers without ever having service. Mind you, we've paid a filing fee. We've paid a service fee to both the sheriff's office through the clerk's office as well as a private investigator. So at this point, my client's bill has ran up to a little over $4,000, and we haven't even seen a courtroom. We haven't even served a mother. Then something incredible happens. My client runs into a family member of the mother, and the family member feels very bad because she knows that my client was very present in his child's life. The reason that he went away had nothing to do with any type of violence or any type of malfeasance with the child or the mother. It was completely independent of that. And they wanted to see that he had an opportunity to go for his child. So they were able to give him an address. We called the private investigator. The private investigator had to stake out that address to make sure that is in fact where the mother lived. We discovered that that was in fact where the mother lived. We had to dismiss our legitimation action in the county where we initially filed, and we had to refile, which means that there were an added filing fee. And then we had to pay the private investigator not only for staking out this location, but also to have her served. It took the private investigator like 4 times before he could finally put the paperwork in her hand. She refused to answer the door. Um, they tried to pull up to somewhere where she had pulled up. She refused to acknowledge. And ultimately, what ended up happening is the mother got into her car, and the process server put the paperwork on her windshield as she's sitting in the car. And he wrote a note about how the service was done, and that's how we had to file it. So ultimately, that's how we got her served. And just to give you a time frame, this wasn't over a period of days or weeks or months. At this point, we're about almost at 2 years trying to handle this. So ultimately, we go to court. And you think, okay, now we're in the courtroom. We have all this paper trail of dad trying to prove he wants to be a father involved with his child. And you think that it will be over. It's not, because mom objects to the legitimation. There's no question about paternity. It's the fact that, well, he abandoned his opportunity interest, which is a grounds for potential denial of legitimation. Well, what that basically means is what the court does is they look at the contact between the father and child before and after the child is born. And so we had ample evidence that there was no abandonment of opportunity interest. But then mom raises the issue of dad's involuntary departure from the child's life. And so that does concern the court, and understandably so. And so what the court does to investigate, because a court does not investigate cases, that is not their role. They make decisions. She had to appoint what's called a guardian ad litem. And so what some of you may know and what some of you may not know is a guardian ad litem is an independent party. A lot of times it's an attorney, but a lot of times it's not. And this person's job is to protect and defend the best interests of the child, which means that that guardian ad litem is going to go into the child's school if this is a school-age child. This guardian ad litem is going to talk to not just the parties, who are the parents, but also relatives who have understanding and knowledge about the current litigation. Also, the guardian ad litem is going to talk to any counselors that the child might, be undertaking or seeing. That guardian ad litem is basically an extension of the court, but they have a different role in giving the court a full, neutral, objective picture of what we have going on here. And so that guardian ad litem sometimes is going to be at odds with parents. But what's important for what I'm describing here outside of just the role of the guardian ad litem is that most times guardian ad litems, and particularly in this circuit, guardian ad litems aren't free. The starting retainer for a guardian ad litem is $1,000. And ordinarily, the court is going to order, unless there's some exception to that rule, is going to order the parties split that fee. So imagine at this point, we've paid my attorney fee, and just again, I am not cheap. But then not only that, filing fees, service fees, investigation fees. Now we have the added fee of a guardian ad litem who has an important role to the court, but nonetheless, it costs at least starting out $500 per party. So as the case progressed, obviously a guardian ad litem cannot do this job overnight. It's going to take sometimes weeks, sometimes months, and that's exactly what happened. It took months, but the guardian ad litem was able to get the whole picture and investigate every allegation. But along the way, the mother had allegations against my client. He's on drugs. No evidence whatsoever, but when someone makes the allegation that someone is a drug user, you can't just let that go, especially when you're talking about who you allow the child to be around. So the guardian ad litem did their job and asked everybody to submit to drug screens. Well, get this, if you're doing like a 17-panel drug screen, you're looking at, on average, about $300 to $500, depending on where you go to get that drug screen. And don't let them say that, oh, the person has an alcohol issue. Now you're talking about what's called a PEF test, which that's an extra $200 to $300. So at this point, we have added, in addition to the guardian ad litem fee, drug screen fees. And, every time the allegation comes up, you have to, as a guardian ad litem, decide, do I take it with a grain of salt? But what if they are telling the truth? What if they are making, a valid concern known and I ignore it? So, of course, the guardian ad litem is going to say, I need everybody to keep submitting to this test. And so now you're undergoing drug tests on top of that. Ultimately, the day comes where we're ready for trial on this legitimation action. And at the trial, I'm thankful to say that the judge saw the big picture, saw everything that we had indicated at our initial court date, that we just, unfortunately, in this situation, we had a mom who just did not want the father involved, for whatever that reason may be. But the dad had completely turned his life around, was working 2 jobs. He had gotten married. He had a house with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. He was doing very well, and his wife was in the military with a very high rank. And so this was a person who really had a great redemption arc and really just wanted to be a part of his daughter's life. And the daughter, at this point, is 9 going on 10, is saying, I want my dad a part of my life. And the judge heard that, and the judge granted the legitimation. Now, something else that I did not mention, but I will mention now, is every time you go to court, there's a fee. It's called a court reporter fee. And so a court reporter is the person who usually sits in front of the judge or somewhere very prominently in the courtroom who is making record, basically speaking into a device so that if a transcript is requested at a later time, you can get that transcript at a cost, but nonetheless, you can get it that would give an accurate record of what everybody said during that particular proceeding. The average rate for a court reporter here is about $42, and usually the way that fee works is it's split between the parties, and you have to pay that fee at court. Now, it's a little different for attorneys. They give us a little grace and just invoice us because they know we're good for the money, but that's not always the case when you have someone who is self-represented, so you often ask for that money at the end of the proceeding. So essentially what I had in this particular case was a legitimation action that took about 3 years. 3 years, almost. My client has spent over $7,000, and he ultimately got everything he asked for. But could you imagine how hard that is for the regular Georgian? First and foremost, not everybody understands the concept that legitimation is not something that you're just born into. You actually have to go through the court if you don't marry the mother of the child. A lot of people do not know that. They believe that if they've gone through child support enforcement, and they're on child support, paternity has established them as the father, they've signed the birth certificate, that's where it ends. I'm the dad. I have a right to see my child. I have a right to help in the decisions affecting my child because not only have I been present, but I'm also on child support. I've also been ordered by child support or through Superior Court to place my child on my health insurance. I'm doing all the things of a good dad, so I should have the right to see my child, but that's just not the way the law is set up. And so I will counter that account with another case that I had that was a little bit less difficult. This was a case involving young parents. The dad ultimately hired me into the case because mom was in a position where she did not want to consent to any type of rights for the dad. The difference is that mom made herself readily available. Mom was cooperative with the court process. But something that the court did that I thought was an excellent idea, and I think that if it's not being done, it should be done more often, is what's called mediation. Now, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with what mediation is, but mediation is where you have a neutral third party, at least in our circuit, which is Burke and Richmond County, and I know this is in Columbia County as well. Your mediator is going to be a lawyer. Now, they're not there to give legal advice, but they are there to make sure that whatever happens comports with the law and also comports with the guidelines for mediation. And so essentially at mediation, it's an opportunity for everybody to raise their issues, to state what their position is on those issues, and see if there's a way to compromise on those issues. And what makes mediation great is that as opposed to having a judge who may only have 30 minutes, an hour, to really listen to your case in that moment and try to understand your family dynamic, it is you and that other parent who understands the dynamic trying to figure it out in a way that fits the legal framework. And so in that vein, with mediation, if people are able to reach resolution with their case, then that can become a final order. And when it becomes a final order that's prepared by the mediator and in conjunction with the court, that means that there aren't any more court dates. If you don't have court dates, you don't have more court fees. One of the downsides of mediation, though, like many processes when it comes to legitimation, is there is a fee that is associated with it. Mediators vary in their rates. It can be anywhere for as low as $100 an hour to, $250 or $300 an hour. And that's not split beyond the parties. I'm saying this taking into account that mediation fees are split between the parties, but you still may be paying $100 to $300 an hour to just have that conversation with somebody in the room who can help facilitate and hopefully bring it to a close. In that particular case, where we had a mom that initially said, I oppose legitimation, I oppose joint legal custody and visitation on these terms, that case was about $3,000 once we went through mediation. And it was because we were able to show the mom what the law said and get the mom to really get out what were her issues and really address what those issues were and bring it to a close. So even when we had agreement, and you're talking $3,000, which takes into account my fee, the filing fees, and the mediation fees, that's still, for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. So I created here a double-sided sheet, and what I have on that sheet are some of the barriers that I can really attest to, and I know that many of my colleagues would agree, have been barriers for fathers to try to legitimate their child, and some ideas or solutions that we can really look at. I can tell you that one thing I did not put on here that I think would change everything, but I suppose arguably it would change everything, is money. Funding these nonprofit organizations that do provide clinics, that do provide pro bono services, and that could come by the way of the state bar. Encouraging members of the bar to donate to these organizations. I know we do that for Georgia Legal Services, and they do provide in limited family law cases representation at no cost or at a prorated cost. But what we really, really need is all hands on deck in educating the community of what legitimation is. Secondly, funding for these programs. What has been really great here in the Augusta and Columbia circuit is that we have on our local bar association pages, as well as our local county clerk pages, forms. And these forms are forms that are used by what we call pro se litigants or self-represented individuals. And it essentially gives an instruction sheet that describes to the applicant what they need to do in order to seek legitimation and what legitimation is, and all the forms that you need to turn in order to initiate the process. In addition to that, what our courts have been doing that has been very effective is right away sending those cases to mediation to see if there's a conversation that could be had before we undertake even greater expense. Some of the barriers that, we're talking about, not just what I highlighted in terms of, the filing fee, the court reporter fee, the service fee, private investigator if you need it, genetic testing, sometimes as a valid objection to a case or to the grant of legitimation could be that this is not the father of the child biologically, or I was married and I had this child during the course of the marriage, but I actually had the child with an extramarital partner. And in those circumstances, in legitimation actions, there's no right to a court-appointed attorney. And so there could be some real complexities there in trying on the part of a father to be present and active and involved with their child, and they just don't even understand the legal standard, or they don't understand what needs to be filed or who needs to be made a party to the case. It's easy when you're talking about a mother, but what if the child is not with the mother? What if the child is with a grandmother or an aunt or just a family friend? Then you have to involve those people. That costs money. And so what I would invite the legislature to consider is how can we not just educate the public, but how can we make it more affordable? Is there a way that we can lower some of these rates? I know that there are paupers affidavits that can be done in certain legal cases where at a certain poverty level threshold, you might qualify on getting a fee waived. But if the goal is to encourage fathers to be part of their children's lives, because I can assure you that I doubt, I can't say 100%, but I very much doubt that a superior court would grant a legitimation without also making sure that that child is receiving child support. And ultimately, I think the goal is that we want fathers to be present, and we also want fathers contributing into the household where their child primarily lives. And so with that, I would just encourage everyone to just kind of look at what some of the barriers are, look at some of the solutions that I've suggested, and, I think collectively we can try to figure out avenues and pathways for dads to really be invited to be a part of their child's life. And I think that would make our communities a lot safer and better. So I would just open the floor if anyone has any questions.
Attorney, Mr. Chairman, you want me to yield to you first? Okay. Attorney Nash, thank you for this very thorough and excellent presentation. Sometimes it's great to learn through examples. I too am an attorney, and so I understand everything that you've presented here, and I think you're spot on. I do want to just go through a series of questions, though, for the benefit of us as panel members as well as the people here in the room. When you talked about the testing aspect in the first scenario, we know that there's costs associated with those testing events, but would you agree that in some instances, though, that type information needs to be revealed? And also, talk about the balance there. The court can impose those test requirements on the father. Can the father in that process also request the court to also impose those same testing requirements on the mother, even though the mother currently has possession of the child?
Absolutely. And oftentimes in a court situation, or even just with the guardian ad litem, if they ask the test of one parent, they're going to usually ask across the board so as to not show impartiality. You do have instances, I'm sure, where only one party is asked to be subjected to testing, but usually initially at the outset of the case, when an allegation is made, my experience has been that everybody gets tested at least once.
You have demonstrated today with a very high level of knowledge and understanding the complexity of the legitimation process, and of course also the various levels that one can be in this process while going through the process. One thing that has seemed to be a common theme in other meetings throughout that we've had with this panel is that there may be a missed opportunity in the very beginning of that child's life for that father to go through some, I'm just going to call them administrative steps. I don't know what to necessarily call them, but just bear with me for that one moment. But there may be some administrative steps that the father can go through at that time that will give that father potential rights at birth. And hypothetically, in your scenarios, and considering the relationship that you built with these fathers representing them, if one of your fathers had the opportunity to prove biologically at the birth of that child that was his child and be there present signing the birth certificate on that day, do you think they would have taken advantage of an administrative action to make them the legitimate father if there was a policy or law in place that would allow that through verification of those methods, biological testing, as well as them being on site signing the birth certificate and consenting, both parents consenting that this is the father of the child? Do you think they would have taken advantage of that situation?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that that potential scenario would resolve a lot of the cases, many of the cases that you see? Because it sounds like in the fact pattern that you gave us today, relationships initially existed, and then they somehow dissolved. And that seems to be a reoccurring theme that we've had fathers who have testified before us. And those fathers have shared that things were well, sometimes all the way up to the age of 10 or 11 with the child and the family and the mother. And something happens and someone gets upset, and all of a sudden the father is left on the outside because there are no rights in that situation there. Do you think that an administrative process on the front end with proper verification would have a significant impact on the volume of legitimation cases that we see in the state today?
I do think that it would be very meaningful, for sure. And I think that we would have a lot of fathers who would take advantage of that opportunity if it's afforded to them. Mhm.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your great presentation. How many of these legitimation cases would you say you've handled over the years?
Whew. Maybe near 100.
What would you guess? How many people try to do this pro se? I'm looking on the Augusta Bar's website, and it is
Yeah.
excellent. It does take you right to the forms, but there are a lot of them, and I would be intimidated by that. And I'm an old man who's been on the earth a long time.
Yes, sir. And so I would also make the distinction between, we have the Augusta Bar Association who has forms, and we also have the Augusta Family Bar Association that has strictly family law forms. So yes, you're right. It can be quite intimidating. In terms of, if I'm just thinking about cases I've experienced where the father had already started, I would say probably a quarter. They had already filed the petition, and then when I get on the case, I realize the petition is missing key components, like they want to legitimate, but they're not realizing that, oh, if you want custody rights, if you want visitation rights, you have to actually raise that in that petition. Otherwise, you're forfeiting that. You're just asking to be legitimated, and you can just be legitimated, but that doesn't give you any greater rights to your child. It just means you inherit, and vice versa.
Have you represented folks in different judicial circuits? And what I'm getting at is, have you seen a sort of a consistency in the process, or is there a disparity from one judicial circuit to the next?
So I initially started out traveling for work. I would go to Middle Circuit and Toombs, and I would say what they've done a really good job of as well is they're making the forms available to the public on their websites. And I've looked at their forms, and they're pretty self-explanatory, and they do contain instructions. So I do see a concerted effort across various counties, where they're rural or more urbanized, where we are trying to have these forms available to individuals. But in terms of making that known to the public, I really cannot speak to those circuits. I know that there are concerted efforts in our community here locally to make the public aware that these forms exist, and you just go to these websites.
If I'm if I'm at the hospital and I'm about to deliver, I have a new child, while I'm not married, is someone at the hospital making me aware of the legitimation process? Because full disclosure, I'd never heard of legitimation before this year.
Yeah. So I cannot speak to whether or not there's somebody in the hospital who would inform that father. I do, of course, they'll sign the birth certificate if they're present. They can also sign at a later time an acknowledgement of paternity, which would, dispute going forward any issue of paternity. But in terms of if there's a built-in procedure of educating a parent that, hey, since you're unmarried, there's a legal process to establish your legal rights, I cannot say one way or the other if that exists.
Doesn't it seem like that should be an obvious thing that's happening in every single hospital out there when someone's having a child, that they're made aware of this?
So I don't know that it would be obvious, because in a way you are educating someone, but you're educating them on the law. And really that should not be done by non-lawyers.
With your time and your experience, did you handle cases pre-2016 when the law changed? And can you give some sense of how your life changed as a result of those changes in the law in 2016?
So I had not started my family practice until 2017.
Okay.
And so in terms of pre-2016, I cannot speak to how the courts handle those situations. I wouldn't be able to go off of personal knowledge.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hefner?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Catrell. You did a beautiful, beautiful job.
Thank you.
You represented us very, very, very well. Better than Columbus did.
Okay.
But looking at the handout that you passed us, one of the barriers you talked about was court delays and backlogs. You also talked about affordability. What is it that you could recommend this body do to help address that? Because I didn't hear you say you was going to adjust your fee, right? So tell us how we can craft language that helps support that and makes that part of it easier.
So, for me, the biggest help would be like more judges. Obviously, our judges are doing the absolute best that they can. I would even contend that between Augusta and Columbia Circuit, we have some of the hardest working judges on our Superior Court bench. With that being said, I think that if we start implementing more with mediation at the outset, that could potentially cut cost later down the line so that there's not a need to always go to the court first to address it, or maybe you do go to court, but then the judge sends the party to mediation, because mediation can resolve a lot or weave out a lot of these cases, especially situations where you legitimately have a mom and dad who are both on the same page about everything. They just want to formalize it because that's what the law requires, is you have to formalize it. And so maybe if money is not an option, we start incorporating more mediation into all of this and start requiring that at the outset, particularly if you're dealing with self-represented parties who don't have the access to a lawyer, don't actually know the law, and don't know exactly what they're asking for. It may be helpful to have a mediator there who can give a general understanding of what this process is, what happens in this process, but also these are your options on what we can do. So that would be my suggestion, is that we start looking at ways where if money is not an option, can we start involving other programs that resolve this without having to backlog the court and clog the court, especially when you have uncontested matters.
Thank you.
Representative Clifton.
Yes, so you said you've done about 100 of these cases, plus or minus. How many of those would you say were uncontested, percentage-wise and generally?
I can safely say over half of them were not contested, not in terms of legitimation. Where the issue would arise is we may not agree on a visitation schedule, or we may not agree on child support. But these are things that quite naturally we raise in a legitimation action. But most of them, I can safely say, moms were not objecting to the legitimation portion.
How about how many were completely uncontested across the board, where mom and dad were on the same page, they were on the page that how they were going to do child support, but they needed to go through the process of, again, legally legitimizing it?
So when you say across the board, uncontested, are you taking into account that it might have started contested, but then it becomes uncontested down the line? Or are you saying just from the outset it's uncontested?
I'm saying more of the situation of mom and dad are in the hospital, have had the baby, and then some point through this process, they realize that dad has no legal rights because they were not married. And therefore, for whatever reason, they may not want to get married, or I guess it doesn't matter at that point, but they want to go through the process so that he is legitimized as the father and everything that comes with it.
Okay, so if I'm just taking based on my experiences, I would say a quarter of my cases, there were no problems at all. I didn't even have to see the judge. I just had to prepare the paperwork. I had mom come in and sign it, and then I filed, I turned it into the judge's office and for signature, and it got filed. I would not be able to give a statistic statewide on what that looks like, where it's just all the way across the board. There's no fighting about anything.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Vance.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Nash.
Yes, sir.
Back to,
Representative Smith, excuse me.
back to the mediation. I'm not an attorney, so it sounds like that should be brought up in the very beginning that they would go and mediate, and maybe it would save a lot of headache. But who brings that up, or do the judges bring that up every time and tell them they should go to mediation, or?
So in a lot of circuits, we have what's called a standing order, and in the standing order, it does actually address mediation. And I know here in Augusta Circuit, and I think it's the same for Columbia Circuit, it's optional of whether or not to go to mediation. But some judges will unilaterally decide, it's not optional with me, you have to go to mediation. And a lot of times, our cases are getting resolved in mediation. And I think that, especially with pro se litigants, people who are self-represented, it would be helpful to do mediation with an attorney, because that person can at least explain the legal standards and give a basic understanding of what's happening. What I do see, and this is something I ran into in one of the cases I described and why the mom was objecting to legitimation, is because she didn't understand what that meant. Like, she didn't realize that you're not signing away your rights. Your child is not going to go primarily live with dad. That's not what we're asking for here. But that mediation actually helped us facilitate the conversation, because of course she's going to assume, rightly so, I represent the interest of my client, but at the same time, I'm not going to misrepresent the law as an officer of the court. And so having that mediator to talk about, okay, this is what the situation is, this is the law on that, and you make your decisions based on that, I can't give you advice. I do think that that's meaningful, especially in the cases where I'm representing somebody, but the other party is not represented. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, if you will, again, Ms. Nash, amazing.
Thank you.
I would hire you at any moment. You're just awesome. I do want us to, though, have a very quick discussion, or if you will, just talk a little bit about, we've talked about forms, we've talked about the location of forms, mm-hmm. which in itself starts the journey of a father potentially representing himself, pro se. Mm-hmm. I want you to discuss, if you will, the dangers of that, and how we never recommend anyone to go about something pro se unless you absolutely have to, because oftentimes people don't win or lose on the merits. They win or lose because they understand procedure or they do not understand procedure. Mm-hmm. And especially in Superior Court, the judges are not allowed to hold your hand. They are not allowed to tell you what to say and when to say it. So once you file that paperwork, you're throwing yourself into an arena where you have absolutely no understanding how it works, and you're automatically at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is a really wonderful consideration to bring up. I always tell people, a person who represents themselves has a fool for a lawyer. As a lawyer, I would never represent myself, no matter what the situation is, even if I think I understand it and have a good grasp on it. It goes back to what I talked about earlier. With these forms, and in general, when you're representing yourself, you have to state certain things. Otherwise, you're waiving that in that particular action. So let's say you have a dad, for instance, that files a petition for legitimation, and he doesn't raise the custody or visitation issue. And the other party, the mother, she actually hires a lawyer because she doesn't know what's happening. So she's saying, I'm going to have a legal expert take on my part. Well, a lawyer is going to say to the judge, Judge, I hear and I understand that he wants visitation. I understand that he wants joint legal custody, but he did not put that in his petition. And so since he did not raise that issue is not up for decision. The only issue before the court is the legitimation. That's dangerous. We don't know what dad had to do to come up with that $250 for that court filing fee, or the $50 to have it served, the $21 court reporter fee. And dad didn't understand that he was forfeiting those rights. And while the judge might empathize on a human level, on a personal level, whether as a father or as a parent or just as a human being, that, I understand, the judge cannot interfere and suddenly decide on issues that are not properly before the court. So that's a real danger. And that's where lawyers come into play. That's where legal education comes into play.
Thinking to myself, I'm looking at the fact that there are 126,000 children born in Georgia each year. 125,000, and if 46% of those are out of wedlock, that's almost
That's a lot.
60,000 children.
Yeah.
And yet I can't determine how many petitions for legitimation have been filed with the courts, because I don't think there's a centralized database that tells me that, which is also
Yeah.
a great big question mark for me.
Yeah. And
But your presentation is incredibly helpful, and I assume we'll all have your phone number so we can call you and ask you 50 more questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all so much.
And we understand you're not cheap, so we'll let the chairman pay the invoice.
Is Andre Lacey? Mr. Lacey, take it away. Tell us who you are and tell us your story.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Lacey. I'm a PGA professional and head golf coach at Payne College here in Augusta. Thank you, Chairman, members of the panel. Ms. Hefner, thank you again for having me. I've been through a lot when it comes to the legal system. So I have become one of those pro se individuals that I went through so much to where I lost everything: house, car, jobs. I mean, because when organizations are trying to obtain information, they call. Once they call and you have a certain type of position, now your character becomes in question. So once your character becomes in question, it puts us as fathers, now we're right back into the position of, where's my next check gonna come from? And it's, at this point, you've done nothing but your job. You haven't done anything that makes you a bad employee or a bad person. However, it's just the cause. Just the cause. With the legitimation process, so I was married when I had my son. We went through a divorce. We had a parenting plan, everything was done. However, after time, it then became, well, it's not gonna be this, it's not gonna be that. I say this is what goes. We back in court. Now, one thing that I've only been to court for child support. So child support has always been the issue. However, as Ms. Nash stated, some of those other issues come up. And as those issues come up, it then bleeds into something else. Now you're spending more money. And those fees just, they go. They go and they continuously go. So it just, as fathers, it just puts us in a really bad position, not only financially, but mentally. Mentally, we then get into the, well, what did I do? What type of father am I if I can't provide these things? Why am I in the court system? Because of my parenting. You begin to question yourself, because you have to answer these questions over and over and over and over and over again. So you just get beat down. You get beat down so much to where you don't know if you're coming or going. You don't know if you're coming or going. You don't know what's going on. Currently, I haven't seen my son in just over 3 years. It's just difficult. And so when you don't see your child, now you have to figure out, okay, well, did I really do this process? And again, I went bankrupt to preserve my rights. So in going bankrupt, again, I become that pro se person. And as a PGA professional, you're automatically assumed as somebody who has some money. I just so happen to have a grandfather that was a PGA legend. And his money is not my money. Granddad was old school, so you don't get anything without working for it. And even still, it's his. You don't get it. And so, but lineage can play a part when you come in there, even though it has nothing to do with your income, what you're earning. If you have a prominent family, it can still hurt you. And so again, as a PGA professional, it's much like, I'm just going to use lawyers. So as an attorney, there's a process, right? And you don't just come out being a top earning attorney. You go through law school. I don't know what the terminology is, but when you're in between passing the bar and, working, you don't make the same money as an attorney would. In golf, you have candidates, you have a PGA associate, and then you have your PGA professionals. As a PGA associate, I just so happened to do some good things in the community that brought a lot of attention. In 2019, I was featured in PGA Magazine for being one of the largest programs in the country. It was myself and 4 other individuals. So right over here at the patch that they're redoing, I had one of the largest programs in the country. It brought a lot of attention. However, it didn't bring a lot of money. One of the things I'm most proud of is my service in the community, where I've had one of the largest junior PGA programs, and only 7 people paid for my program because there were scholarships that paid for it. I'm not a money person, so the money that came back that was for coaching fees, I used that money to pay the golf course. But that money was not for me. It was never in my accounting or anything. It was just within my program. So I say that to say that was brought up against me in court. I went through an 18-month financial audit where Square, bank accounts, tax returns, and at the time my earnings was only about, it was under $30,000 because I was a PGA associate. The only additional funding I had was from my military benefits. So at the time I was a 50% veteran, and that's kind of what I lived off of. In that 18-month financial audit, it was told that because of my lineage, I owned a golf course. I had millions of dollars in cash that, I just choose not to support my son as best I could. So we went through that. And again, my title, yes, golf professional, but yet, even though my taxes say otherwise, I still had to go through and prove that I didn't have that money. So, it just puts a strain on you to where you don't know if you're coming or going, and you don't see any light. There's very, very little light. And at that point, once anybody starts to kind of feel that, we start kind of looking at our faith. Oh, this is going bad. This is going bad. Like, okay, well, what would God do? And it's hard to find them answers. It's hard to find those answers in those dark times. So when it goes back to this process, I really think everything should kind of run hand in hand. The legitimation process, the child support, and I would throw in child protective services. They should have some sort of system where they all run together sometimes. Those 3 systems, because they kind of move different things can go by. The last point I wanted to go to is Georgia's a state where there's no penalty for filing false claims at CPS or Children Protective Services. There's no penalty. But again, if you're the person that has to prove it, your character comes in question, and now again you're proving yourself. Again, being a golf professional, being a public person, when someone is calling the places that you volunteer at, and I volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club, I volunteer with several churches, just wherever I can help. And when somebody who's very adamant about testing you as a person or proving that they're right about you as a person, they will go through great lengths to prove that. So if somebody's tracking your movements, which the last time we went to court, there were greater than 50 pages of my social media presented to show the different places that I go. And so I can safely assume that some of those places were contacted, which again enables how I can kind of continue to work my business the way I do, my relationships, which again, it just makes it tougher. So I don't know if my story really helps with this process, but it definitely, it prevents us from a lot. Last thing, there's this thing within the school system that prevented me from seeing my son. Simple things like going to lunch. There's I don't know if it's called a red notice or emergency list or whatever, but the custodial parent can tell the school that you're a dangerous person and you can't have contact unless you call them and have it approved. So to my knowledge, when my son was in 5th grade, I was on an active red notice. My typical thing, go pick him up. Mr. Lacey, we can't release him to you. What you mean? I don't know any of this is going on. So behind the scenes, there's no contact with the father. So these things are being done. You have no contact. So how can you don't even know what to say or argue or, hey, that's not right. Maybe we can talk about this, or you don't even know what's going on. And it works, I'm sure y'all heard of people being on child support and not knowing they're on child support. Is that something you guys heard since having these? Once again, in my case, which made my case very difficult, my son's grandmother was a director of child support. So I was on child support for a while and didn't know it. There's nothing that you can't prepare a fight for that. So I've never been in trouble. I've never been a very loud or boisterous person. Always been mild-mannered. Been to the military. I was a medic in the military. After being injured, came home, rehab. About a year later, I became a firefighter. Did nearly 10 years as a firefighter. While being a firefighter, I also began working on my nursing. And through those old military injuries, I couldn't no longer do that service. And so, I bring up that to say I've always been in community service. I've always been a person that wanted to help somebody else. However, when it came to me needing help, it was very difficult because those fees are high. Those fees are high, and as a firefighter at the time, my base pay was $36,000. But I'm paying $900 a month in child support, and nobody cares about what else I have to do. So I hope this kind of enlightens some of the things that we go through as fathers. Again, I've always been a professional individual, and just got caught up in the system in a sense. But I'm still positive. But we just have a tough time. No matter how good of a person you are, it beats you.
Coach Lacey, we appreciate you, man. I mean, you have contributed more than what you probably could never imagine, because oftentimes when we get in these committee meetings and we're talking policy and we're talking X and we're talking O's, we forget about emotions. We forget about feelings. We forget about, we're not just talking about, names. These are actual children. Mm-hmm. And what you have highlighted today, what I want to talk about a little bit is the relationship between the child and the father. A father-son relationship can be very special. And when that father is deprived of having a relationship with that son, and from what it sounds like to me, and many times is to get back at the dad, but it hurts the child more than what people can ever imagine. If you will, you mentioned your service at the Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your services, working with churches, and you're at Payne College, a wonderful HBCU here in Augusta, Georgia. When I think about the numbers that Mr. Chairman has been sharing with this room, and every time he gives those numbers, the percentage of children born out of wedlock and the average number of children born in Georgia each year, it begins to it's hard to grasp the complexity of the relationships out there, and how that may be contributing to things like, student dropout and youth crime and teenage pregnancy, and things of that nature. So many things that could be impacted if we just make the family whole again. If you will, not proclaiming that you're an expert in this area, but you do have a right to have an opinion. I'm going to ask you your opinion. From what you have seen working with these young folks in the Boys and Girls Clubs and our churches, seeing students come to college that's leaving their families for the first time, how damaging is the lack of relationships sometimes with parents? How damaging is that to our community and our state? What type of impact are you seeing?
Ooh, it's detrimental. Like it's a culture killer. When I was coming up through the Boys and Girls Club, and I'm sorry, I hate to put it in male, female, but when you saw a male in there, a lot of times you would look up to him immediately just because of a presence. They look like a father. The culture now has kind of shifted. Is like, it's just, they go away from you. They go directly to the women because the women typically make the decisions. And no matter what the level of it is, so there's that lack of discipline or respect, because again, they're mostly used to dealing with women. So it just sways so many different things. It does, because you got young people, they don't care about their appearance, and they're only getting one perspective. Not saying that the dad's perspective is right or the mom perspective is right, but when you're only getting one influence and one type of influence, so you get this family and you get all of this family, you're not getting the other side. You're not getting that person that can reach out and kind of change the direction of it. So when they're coming to college, they're so used to kind of staying within what they're used to where they're not looking into what could be. So they're not getting a whole collegiate experience because they're only sticking inside their bubble. They're not looking to go outside and actually do what you're supposed to do in college and learn the different aspects of life and how to do it. They're just stuck navigating in this one little area.
Thank you, Coach Lacey, for coming to share your story. Appreciate that. You and I have had a couple of private conversations along your journey.
Yes.
And I completely empathize with what your experience is. And hopefully you having the opportunity to come and share this with us helps us to better prepare the rest of our community. Before the speaker before, Attorney Nash, had indicated that educating our community is a very, very good posture, probably the most proactive thing that we could do. Your work in some local community programs and your own program, what does that look like in terms of educating young men or young athletes or young people in general about what this behemoth process looks like? Because they don't know it's a problem until it's a problem. So what does education look like? Does it look like an extension of other community programs? Does it look like some of the stuff that I know Attorney Nash does to go present to people? But sometimes some of the young people that you are in spaces with, they don't have the opportunity to have this type of access and platform. So what, in your opinion, what does that look like?
Programming always is a benefit. But so when we had the conversation about speaking, I was very reluctant because speaking and being public about these types of things can be taken and saying, you know, you're playing victim, and that's a rough thing to kind of navigate. So some security in a sense where fathers can speak, and I'm not bashing my son's mother. I wish her the absolute best. So much so that, you know, periodically I send her, you know, I try to send uplifting messages or you know, just something like, look, I forgive you for anything that has happened, that, you know, let's move forward, you know. So the programming where the family can be there together, you know, let the kids see the parents work it out. It's easy for them to see them fight. That's easy. To see them work through it is a better thing. So mediation, but there are so many different things. We try to have mediation, and you know, well, can we have the child present? Well, we don't think the child should be a part of this process. You know, I think it would be a good thing to have a child a part of the process that's supposed to show decorum and order. And so that may lead to, you know, children having better problem solving skills, because now we're introducing a different way to solve problems. So what that type of programming or you know, legislature that is, I have no clue. That is not my arena. But just something that would show the family unit a little bit closer. Even though we're separate, we can be a lot closer.
Well, Coach Lacey, you seem like just a great guy. I know I'd benefit from hanging out with you. And I'm looking forward to coming to the Payne College Christmas event that my great friend Russell Brown is putting on in December. Yes. So that's just a little plug for Russell, who's a great entertainers event in December. Yes. But listen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Representative Hefner, Representative Clifton, they're right here, and we've got our two excellent representatives here as well. So we've got quite a few people to get through today, and out of respect for everybody, we're going to try and start motoring through these, probably about 3 or 4 minutes per speaker, because we've got 10 folks to get to. But that being said, we're all very accessible. Thank you, Coach. Everybody on this committee is absolutely accessible and available through the Capitol, and we'll make it easy for you to find us if you need us to continue the conversation. So that being said, let's move on. Francine Smith. Francine Smith, are you here? Mrs. Smith, would you please come join us and share with us? And if you can possibly do it, let's try and so we can get it. Oh, good. Will you mention that?
Ms. Smith is being accompanied by her representative and her home pastor, Representative Carlton Howard.
Yeah. Once again, thank you. Thank you for being in Augusta, and of course with such a significant topic. I think is important, and I've been learned from the discussion already, especially from Attorney Nash. She told you that she was expensive, but she didn't tell you how excellent an attorney she is. And I made a note and said, don't underestimate her tenacity by her stature. She's a fighter as an attorney. But I came up because I had a conversation with Representative Hefner a few weeks ago over lunch, and hearing about this legitimation process, I shared with her the incident, the situation with my member, I'm a pastor of a church as well as a representative, and I run into a lot, see both sides of this issue a lot, and have to counsel and advise in those situations. But in the case of Sister Francine Smith, we talked about this with Representative Hefner, and about a year ago, her son was killed in an accident out on Deansbridge Road with his 3 kids in the car. Antonio was killed, and 4 kids in the car. And what happened was, prior to this, she had access to her grandkids, saw them, met with them, and all of that. But since that process, the kids have gone in a foster situation with an aunt. Now that she's been denied access to the kids. And I guess the way that would tie into this process from the perspective of legitimation is if he had been legitimized, maybe she wouldn't be having this difficulty right now. But that's her story, the baseline of her story. And I wanted to just come up, and she was a little hesitant about being here as well. And I thought I'd just come up and just kind of give that phase of it. But if you got any questions, I guess she can answer those questions for you about how frustrating that is. And I would say the other piece of that, my daughter's an attorney up in Henry County, and she faces those same frustrations with this process in Georgia. And she literally just said she just don't want to even deal with this process. She'd rather go do a probate than to deal with this kind of process in Georgia, because it's her word is so convoluted. It was her words. Okay, but this is, and once again, I let Ms. Smith say whatever she wants to say.
My name is Francine Smith, and I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a great-grandmother. And I always had access to all of my grands. And not only did I have access to them, I supported my grands with their schooling, Christmas, every holiday was my days with my grandkids. I'm a truck driver, so no, I'm not home every day. So that's why I have to take the holidays to spend with my grandkids. Father Day, that's something that the children's supposed to do for their father, but I do it for my 2 sons so that they can be there with their kids. Mother Day, instead of my kids doing something for Mother Day for me, I do it so that I can have that time with my grandkids. But after my son passed, the last time I seen these 3 grands, because he had 6 kids, and only 3 of them is in foster care. And they are in foster care with their great aunt. And we had a good relationship up until the Christmas holidays. Thanksgiving, they spent the entire Thanksgiving with me, and the last time we spent together, we was at my church. We had our prayer breakfast. I took them back to their aunt. I haven't seen my grandkids since that day. Christmas, my oldest son is in a club called Bridge, which they go out and they do Christmas for different kids. So last year he put these 3 kids in, well, all 6 of them. And they was to meet to my house, you know, for the gift to be presented to them. And the aunt got upset because my son had the kids to come to my house. And after that, because they didn't do it at her house, she would not let me see my grandkids since. And you know, I really don't know what to say, because to me that is selfish. Because this wasn't about me, and it wasn't about her, it was about the kids. Seeing these kids with a smile on their face. And I have texted her to try to keep from going to court dragging this through court, that we come to agreement when I can have these kids. I never did get a response back from her. So I need to know what else I can do.
I did share with Francine the Georgia code where grandparents have rights under certain conditions, but I think this legitimation process probably would even supersede that if something better was in place. Yeah.
Ms. Smith, have you reached out to an attorney to see about what it would cost, what measures you need to do in the absence of an actual legitimation being established? Do you know what that looks like in terms of a process or a cost?
No, I haven't. But I did, their mom got in contact with me last week. And she won't ask me would I be guardian of the kids. And that's something I wouldn't mind doing, but like I said, I'm a truck driver, so in order for me to do that, I have to terminate my job. And at this moment, I'm not in a situation to be able to do that. And I told him it will at least be a year before I would be able to do this. And I did talk to the supervisor over, I guess he over the foster care program or something. And like you said, and which I already knew, that they need somebody that's gonna be home every day. And right now, I'm not in that position.
Mr. Smith, thank you for sharing, and Representative Howard as well. It reminds us just how complicated the issue is, and Representative Howard, it was well said, even beginning with the legitimation process, and whether or not your son ever even was aware of that process. It is a reminder of the ripple effect and how complex this really is. And Representative, thank you for pointing out the part about the grandparents' rights. There's a great family practice lawyer right over there, by the way. Might be worth a conversation. But thank you for sharing this morning, and it's a poignant reminder of how very complicated
Yeah,
the issue
because
is.
before my son passed, the kids lived there with him. They lived with him up into months before he passed, and he took them to his aunt's house because he said he needed help, and he knew that she kept kids, so he took them to her, you know, to be able to help him at that time until he got himself situated.
Thank you. Thank you. Justin Almanza, Mr. Almanza, will you come join us? Thank you. I think you drove a ways to get here. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you. Good morning. I just wanted to start by saying thank you all for all the work that you're doing. I'm going to try to make it brief and just kind of point out a couple big issues, I think, that are going on with the state and that are really affecting our children. So, Mr. Chair, actually, like you mentioned, about half of the kids in Georgia right now are being born to unwed parents. And if I'm reading the statistics right, out of the other half, somewhere close to half of those kids experience divorce from their parents at some point in their life, right? So totaling those two together, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of kids are either dealing with legitimation issues with their parents or divorce, custody, separation issues with their parents, right? So I thank you for the work that you're doing. I think you have a huge chance to make a good impact here. So I think the ultimate goal for all of us is increased parental involvement, right? Increased father involvement, specifically when we're talking about legitimation. But I specifically am a big advocate for shared parenting. I think that kids need both parents, and I think that we can talk about fatherlessness statistics. If kids don't have access to their father or their mother, the increased issues, dropout rates, drugs, self-harm, all that kind of stuff. So. What I want to talk through real quick is just talking about how, yes, the legitimation process, making that easier, more accessible, more affordable is absolutely good, but it also only goes so far if we don't address other issues like child custody, for example. So right now, and I actually have some documents here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but these are all parenting plans, default sample parenting plans. From one of them is from the Augusta Judicial Circuit. I've got Chatham County, Fulton County, Gwinnett County. Almost every, actually like the attorney was talking about this morning, almost every judicial circuit in Georgia has a default parenting plan on their website, and these all come from the Superior Court rules in Georgia also. And if you read through this sample parenting plan, again, I'm just looking at the one from Augusta where we are, it defines the non-custodial time with the parent, typically the father, 85% of the time in Georgia it's the father. It says the weekend for the purposes of this parenting plan, a weekend is going to begin at 6 p.m. on Friday and end at 6 p.m. on Sunday, and you get 2 of those a month, right? So we're talking 4 days a month that the father would have time with the child. And so if we're talking about parental involvement and father involvement, you can go through the years and thousands of dollars of the legitimation process. You can end up getting your name on that piece of paper, and at the end of the day, 3 years and $10,000 later, all that really does for you, even with these parenting plans that we have in Georgia, you get 4 days a month with your child, right? Your child will never be taken to school by their father. They'll never be picked up from school by their father. They'll never be taken to ballet practice or soccer games or football practice. There's no caveat in this. Obviously, if you have an amicable relationship between the mother and the father, then they can agree to something else. But in general, that's, as you've already heard, like in general, that's kind of rare, right? So I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that we talk a lot about the court cases and how overwhelming it is for judges in our current court system, and these current parenting plans that we have, the lack of a shared custody presumption in Georgia is really only making that worse, right? So, for example, we're actually incentivizing, believe it or not, like in Georgia right now, we are incentivizing conflict between parents by assigning, in most cases, most judges in most courtrooms are going to assign a primary custodian that's going to get about 80% of the time with the child. They're going to get decision-making authority with the child. They're going to get child support, a child support check until the child turns 18. We don't say that we pick a winner in the courtroom, right, because we're trying to do what's in the best interest of the children, but essentially what that ends up being is that the judge more or less has picked a winner in that courtroom. And then what we also say is if you're not happy with that, 2 years later, you can go back and file for a modification, right? So guess what that does to the courtroom? We pit 2 otherwise good parents. I'm assuming for our discussion here that the kid has 2 fit, willing, and able parents that just want to be involved in this kid's life. They go to the court, you don't get the outcome that you want. 2 years later, you file again and you try to get that changed. Right? Well, maybe now I can be the primary custodian and I can have decision-making authority. Maybe I can get the child support check, whatever it is, right? Maybe it gets flipped and then 2 years later, guess what happens again, right? You go back to that courtroom and then you repeat, right? Huge burden on our courtroom, huge burden on our judges, our lawyers. And again, ultimately, the kids are the ones that suffer because we know that a lot of these kids have 2 good, fit, willing, and able parents that just want to be involved in these children's lives, right? The last things that I brought to share are just a couple things that we know. I have a lot of research. If you're interested, we know that shared parenting is, again, if the kid has 2 good, fit, willing, and able parents, I've got Just offhand, there are actually a lot more, but I've got about 17 studies here talking about how we know that shared parenting is the best thing for children's well-being. About another 15 major academic research studies that show that shared parenting is the best thing for mothers and fathers in situations like this. It gives the mother, who traditionally spends 90% of her time with the kids, except for those every other weekends, it gives that mother a little bit of an extra break. It lets the father be more involved, allows him to be more responsible. And I think one of the most interesting things to me, and I think one of the most important things, is that we have a lot of data from other states and actually other countries that have implemented shared parenting, where we've actually seen things like domestic violence and child abuse go down dramatically in states that have implemented shared parenting. Like, we have data from Ohio, Kentucky, the entire country of Spain at this point that have all implemented shared parenting, equal joint custody, 50-50 custody, whatever you want to call it. Many states that have implemented shared parenting, and we've seen a huge decrease in things like domestic violence and child abuse. So kids are safer, mothers are happier, fathers are more involved by starting with shared parenting as part of this legitimation process, and also in anytime a custody dispute comes up.
I have two questions for you, Mr. Almanza. First of all, is there a state that you can think of that is sort of the gold standard?
So last year, two come to mind. One of the first ones to pass a shared parenting law was Kentucky back in 2017. We have and that's nice because it's been long enough by this point that we have a lot of data from Kentucky to show things, like I said, where domestic violence rates have gone down, child abuse rates have gone down, families overall are healthier and happier. And then last year, Florida passed some really good shared parenting legislation along with legitimation legislation. They actually passed a legitimation law right along a shared parenting law to kind of tackle both of these issues at the same time. Now, since that was just last year in Florida, we don't have a ton of data from that yet, but happy to provide you copies of that law or get you connected.
Good. The second question is, on the front end, if you had two parents at the hospital that are not married, but they both are agreeing, there's an acknowledgement of parentage, and there's a paternity test. Would maybe a work plan for or visitation custodial plan on the front end, how much of these problems would be avoided if that were done when things are still good and people are committed to each other and committed to the idea, but they did it on the front end? Would that make a pretty big difference with the courts?
Yeah, I think it would, absolutely. And so I think one of the most interesting things when you talk to parents that are going through this, there are a lot of men and women, mothers and fathers, both sides, who say that they were not high conflict. This term gets thrown around a lot. We've heard stories of parents that don't agree, mothers that don't let a father or a grandmother see the children. A lot of parents, when you talk to them, they will say that they were not high conflict until they walked into that courtroom, right? Until they learned that one of them, again, was essentially going to come out a winner in this contest. One of them was going to get almost all the parenting time, decision making, a child support check, whatever. And so absolutely, I think having a amicable, upfront discussion before the judge gets involved, call it mediation or whatever, I think that could help the court caseload and also solve a lot of these problems on the front end. Sure.
Excellent. Any other questions? Mr. Almanza, thank you so much for your time today, and I know that you, Mrs. Murray, thank you. You gave us some great information last month, and we welcome anything else you want to share with us. Any other data? We're all ears. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, guys. Yeah.
And I apologize for having to run out on this. No problem.
Thank you. Michelle Lockhart, Michelle Lockhart, Miss Lockhart.
Good morning. Well, okay. So today I have a statement from a dad who could not be here that I'm going to read for you, okay? His name is Dr. Jamaica Hunter out of Henry County, Georgia. In April 2024, I filed to legitimate my daughter in Henry County. My case was not heard until January 2025, nearly 9 months later. During that time, although I was fully present in her life, I had no legal rights. I could not make medical or school decisions for her, and my parenting time was not guaranteed. This is not an isolated case. Fathers Incorporated reports that 80% of fathers who began the legitimation process never completed, not because they are unwilling, but because the process is costly, confusing, and discouraging. Georgia also stands alone as the only state in the nation that requires a separate legitimation step even after paternity is established. These delays harm children most. While fathers wait months or years to be recognized, children live without the legal stability and security that both parents should provide. Reform is needed by streamlining procedures, setting reasonable time limits for hearings, and reducing unnecessary steps. Georgia can make the process more efficient, fair, and centered on the best interests of the children. Every delay in legitimation is time stolen from a child's right to stability and both parents' protection. Respectfully, Dr. Jamaica Hunter. Okay? And I just had one quote real quick I wanted to say to you all. An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again, but one which crumbles from within, that's dead forever. So as you all deliberate and look at different ways on how to rectify a lot of these systemic issues with legitimation, I would like for you all to keep that quote in mind, because the empire is the family that's being impacted. And once that's been toppled, then what are you left with in your society? Nothing. So that's all I have. Thank you.
You've joined us at all 3 locations, right? And you graced us with your presence. We certainly appreciate it. You've provided a wealth of knowledge, and your advocacy is second to none. And I just want to commend you publicly on what you've been doing for a long time, working with some great people, Fathers Incorporated, and some other wonderful folks. And it's advocates like you that give people hope and inspiration. And that's what we need a lot of in this process. Thank you.
Howard Robinson. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. Intended to. All right. I've given national pitch competitions, spoken from the thousands, and this is the most important speech/conversation I'll give. You'll find out shortly. The passion will come out. I'll be working on that, but you'll see as I exemplify my story, where that come from. So I'll also be sharing the story of another father. So to start, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We thank you for providing the opportunity to speak today about the legitimation process and our experiences with it. My name is Howard Robinson. I'm an educator, and I'm a father, and I've dedicated my life to helping children. I spent 10 years of my life educating kids, from students in Cape Town, South Africa, south side of Chicago, Northwestern University, in almost every district in the state of Georgia. But for some reason, I'm not deemed fit to see my own child. When I became a father myself, I was thrust into parental alienation because of Georgia's outdated legitimation laws. I followed the law my entire life, never even had so much as a parking ticket. I'm from the inner city of Chicago. Both of my parents were affected by gun violence. My father was shot and blinded when I was 6 months old. He never got to see my first steps. And because of Georgia laws, I never got to see I didn't get to see my son's first steps. I did everything right. 4 years of college, stayed out of trouble, committed my life to teaching children. And I am petrified to walk into a courtroom. Even with my accolades, I educate, I teach. I've taught thousands of children, but the prospect of standing in front of a judge and knowing that my livelihood can be taken away, my freedom, and my ability to see my child, is what is a hard fight to do. As a citizen, a law-abiding citizen, it's really hard for me to comprehend why any father would want to have a child in the state of Georgia. There was a question that asked, like, if young men, what kind of education do they have? I tell them that you better be informed or you're in for it. I sometimes talk to my friends that if Jesus, our Lord and Savior, came back, Georgia would be the last place he would want to be born, because his father would have no rights to see him. His fathers will have no right to be there for him, just like I. And this isn't just my story. It's a systemic problem. Children without fathers are four times more likely to live in poverty and twice as likely to face discipline issues or drop out of school. I see this every day. I see young men who don't know how to control their emotions come up to me, Mr. Howard, thank you for giving me guidance and instruction and keeping me out of jail. But for some reason, I can't do that for my own child. In classrooms, we see the absence of father's presence directly connects to suspensions, absenteeism, and behavioral struggles. I got another story. I want you to imagine this. A man follows every step the law requires. He establishes paternity, files the right paperwork, pays the fees, and waits for the courts to grant him the right to be called a legal father. But while he waits, while the system drags on, he loses his daughter. Not because he was unwilling, not because he was unfit, but because Georgia's legitimation process delayed his access to her life. That process cost him time, it cost him money, and most tragically, it cost him the chance to raise his child. This is a real story. There was a father who lost the life of his only baby girl. He filed paperwork. He had a court date, and because of delays, his child is no longer here. That is the strongest man I've ever seen in my life, because I wouldn't be able to be here if I lost my boy. And knowing that I did everything that this system told me to do, and it failed me. This system is failing fathers and families and children that they're supposed to be protecting. I see it every day in that classroom when students come up to me and don't have the direction. They don't know what discipline is. And when they flock to me and run to give me a hug, and I haven't been able to hug my own son, it breaks my heart. There are a lot of fathers out there who you talked about that statistic of 146,000 children being born, not too many applications. Fathers have feel defeated. I feel like I'm in the middle of war with blindfolds, and there are landfills around me. And on the other side of that landfill is my boy. Every step I could take could blow me up, so I'm immobilized. A false allegation cost me a year of my career. I was falsely in prison in Sandy Springs due to a false allegation involving this. An educated black man who goes to schools and tells children to stay out that. I was in that same room for nothing. Couldn't teach these same students for an entire year. Had to get my record expunged. So when it's time to go file paperwork, my anxiety is high. What if another lie comes out again? What if I'm unable to get to those kids that I'm trying to infect? I have saved lives from young black men who said, Mr. Howard, you're the reason I put that gun down. But because of this process, I don't even feel mentally fit enough to walk into a classroom to see another child. And I know that the lawmakers and the policymakers and the individuals here, it's their best intent to help. But what is going on now is costing children, fathers, it's costing our society, productive citizens, and it's costing our entire legal system to have resources drained. We have to put more programs into gun prevention, drug prevention. What about father promotion? Promote dads in our communities. I would not be here without Fathers Matter ATL or Fathers Incorporated. I would be not on this earth because of the pain of not being there for my boy. I haven't seen him in 2 years. He lives in this state. That process of having to find a private investigator, I don't know where my son is, so I can't file the paperwork. And I have to put on a straight face every day walk into a classroom and see kids and say, hey, Mr. Howard, we happy to see you. I'm happy to see them. But when I go home, I sit and cry. Tears just like this, because I cannot see my own child. But instead of becoming bitter, angry father, I chose to be here. I chose to advocate. I chose to create programs and work with Fathers Matter ATL and Fathers Incorporated to show them that black fathers, fathers in general, no matter the shade, are there and are important. And I don't feel like the system has acknowledged that or has allowed too many pathways for that. And that's why we need the Good Dad Act and similar policies that guarantee equal parental rights once paternity is established. This isn't just a family issue, it's an education issue, an equity issue, and an economic issue. I fight for this not just for myself, but for the fathers and children who come after me. My father couldn't see my first steps, and I was not allowed to see my sons. No parent and no child should have to do that again. The data is clear, the stories are real, and the time to act is now. We look forward to staying engaged with the members of this committee as policies are developed and want to be a resource to help craft solutions to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you today. Thank you for your honesty and for sharing your pain with us as we work through this process to understand how to make it better. As a lawmaker and a participant of the process that has created this situation for you and many other fathers, I offer my apology for not hearing and not understanding the impact abroad. But I am certainly blessed to be here today with a greater understanding of how significant this work is. I thought I understood it, but today it has even more revelatory impact for me. And as you were making your points, you made reference to the Good Dad Act. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so give me one moment. The Good Dad Act is a model legislation that has been introduced in several states, with Florida passing it in 2023. The core principle is simple. Once paternity is legally established, fathers automatically receive equal parental rights without having to go through extra legal hurdles like Georgia's legitimation process. Currently, in Georgia, if a child is born out of wedlock, the mother has sole custody by default, even if the father signs the birth certificate. A father must file separate court action for legitimation in order to gain custodial rights. As we mentioned, this process can be long, expensive, and inconsistent, and also cause delays. So the Good Dad Act will help Georgia give fathers equal rights at birth, protect children's safety, and save time and resources. So it essentially says that once a father steps up, once paternity is legally established, the father automatically, keywords, automatically receives equal parental rights. If the dad says, I'm the dad, paternity, he gets to be a dad. The same way the Bible says we're supposed to. So I'm sorry, the passion came out. But I'm sorry,
Understood.
I'm sorry,
yes. Let me ask you this other question. In a circumstance where, you know, everything works magically like it's supposed to, okay? If we sit down and had a discussion that what we wanted to craft and put together was the Good Dad Act, that scenario that you mentioned a little bit earlier about the landmines and all of the other obstacles, what are the opponents of this type of legislation? What are they going to say? What do we need to prepare for?
The main biggest thing is the overcoming the social and legal bias that to even want to give fathers those parental rights. Let me transition into that. As one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to go into the court systems, and it's been exemplified here, no matter how great of a man you are in terms of your giving back your community, there is an implicit bias for you being a father not to be valued. So this removes any of that implicit bias to say fathers are inherently valued. We have to fight to prove our value as a father. I have to show the courts why I should be there instead for the courts to show me why I shouldn't be there. So to address that, I think that will be the best way. I'm sorry. So.
What are the opponents going to say?
So for that, I would have to defer to some of my Father Matters alumni speakers who will come to that. Because again, like I said, I'm an educator. I stumbled into advocacy. I have dedicated my life to developing curriculum. I've taught at Georgia State. I was taught Robert Morris University on the highest of levels. I was thrust into this and saw a issue that I would die for, literally. So no other dad has to go through the pain that I went through. I'd make that sacrifice. So I don't know what the opponents did. I can imagine why a father couldn't have equal parental rights, but it's to the moment, Representative Hefner, I don't have those specifics, but I'm sure there is a Father Matters or Fathers Incorporated representative here who can surely answer that question.
Thank you very much.
You're a great orator, you're a
Thank
great
you.
speaker, and very compelling. Have you been through the process, and are you in the process? Have you been through the process? And if so, when did you start the process?
Yes, so I have attempted to start the process, but as it was mentioned earlier, I don't know where my child's mother is.
Okay.
I have to hire a private investigator. I can't locate her. I've worked with 2 programs, Fathers Matter ATL, Fathers Incorporated, that provide services to help me file. They bring attorneys. They help me upload them. I don't know where she is. So a lot of fathers, like myself, are willing to pay and get the assistance, but if we don't know where they are, don't want a rock in the well or something like that. I don't know where she is. So it's either I continue to waste money, throwing rocks at a wall, or try to go the private investigation route, which is what I'm attempting to now. But again, I'm on a teacher's salary in this economy. I don't have thousands of dollars to pay for an attorney.
Okay.
I'm just trying to survive right now. So it puts me in a rock and the hardest place, either my career or my child. That's what a lot of fathers are dealing with right now. And unfortunately, if I had to choose my career until I'm at the point where I'm at now, where I can be there for my child, it shouldn't be that way. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you for your excellent testimonial today. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Cody Pyatt? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Actually, yes.
Okay, good.
Hello, my name is Cody. I moved, just quick backstory, I moved down here in 2020, met a girl, she got pregnant, she moved down here herself. I couldn't be a dad from 800 miles away, so I packed up my car in a station wagon and moved down here. Here we are 6 years later. Because of Georgia's family state laws, I couldn't see my son. We had a decent relationship at first. We broke up. She decided, because I wasn't going along with what she wanted, she kept my son from me for a year. Chris White can attest to this. That was probably one of the darkest years of my life. But with the help of Fathers ATL and with the grace of God, I was able to pull myself out of that and start the legitimization process. But because of the state laws, how they are down here, I wasn't allowed, and I'm still not allowed, to attend any school functions for my son. He just started kindergarten this year. Haven't been able to attend anything for him. Without being legitimized, we as fathers have no rights. We can't do anything. Even if we disagree with what the mother is saying or doing, nothing we say matters because of Georgia state laws. I wasn't allowed to be at the hospital when he was born. Therefore, I couldn't sign the birth certificate. And I moved down here specifically to be a dad because I'm an Army brat. I was raised to take responsibility for my actions. This was one of them, the biggest one I ever had, and I threw myself fully into it, and I love being a dad. Something another speaker before me said is fathers that get every other weekend, we get 4 days a month. That's 26 days a year out of 365 days. I can't be a dad in 26 days. I can't be a dad for 48 hours because it's either be dad, stern but fun, or be dad, just go out, do stuff, have fun with him. It's a hard balance to do because I want to make those positive memories with my son, but I can't because I have such limited time. I need to make that decision. Do I want to be the disciplinary dad or I want to be the fun dad? Let's go out, let's go to the pool, let's go hiking, let's go. Just last weekend, I took him to Altitude Trampoline Park to meet Bluey. It sucks that I have to miss so much of my son's life because two consenting adults cannot come to the table and put their personal feelings aside for the betterment of their child. Because of that, because of Georgia's horrific state family laws, the Good Dad Act should be passed in the state of Georgia. Many other states have already passed it or passed something similar to it. Georgia needs to get on board and do that. We as fathers have 4 sacred duties bestowed upon us by God, and I will list them right here for you now. We are to be the lovers of our family, the leaders of our family, the protectors of our family, and the providers of our family. With Georgia state laws, how can we do that? I can be a lover for my son 2 days. And then I essentially sit in the back of his mind. Yes, I get to video chat with my son every day between 6 and 7 o'clock. He's 5. He's not going to sit on that video call the entire time. And I tried to get him to, but if you guys know 5-year-olds, it's not going to happen. Part of not being legitimized, we as fathers have no knowledge of what is even going on with our child if the mother of the child isn't willing to talk to us. That's what my situation is. Even after we've gone through court, I get visitation on the weekends, which I can show you over 800 photos of my son from the day he was born until last weekend. I am a very present and active father in my son's life, and I will always be. Nothing will stop me from doing that. But the Georgia state laws. I cannot be that active father that I didn't have when I was a child, because I'm a child of divorce when I was 8. I was acutely aware of everything that was happening between my parents. The naysaying, the physical violence, I saw it all. It was one thing I swore my son would never see. We need to repeal the Georgia state law legitimization because it does nothing but damage our families. It does not provide, it does not help. I understand you as representatives, you guys have the best intentions. You as our leaders, we would want you to. But the current Georgia state law is not helping anyone. If anything, it's helping tear families further apart. And that's one of our major issues as a country, is we have families that are being torn apart by petty BS instead of coming together under God, as our forefathers intended to happen. It needs to be replaced with the Good Dad Act or similar statutes that immediately allow fathers that step up and want to be that active, proactive father in their child's life. The Good Dad Act allows us to do that. It does not make us sit back and work and prove that we are good parents. I think I proved that when I met his mom 3 months later. She was pregnant. I packed up my whole life in a car and moved 800 miles down here to be a dad. And because of your state laws, I had to wait. Excuse my language, but that's BS. That should not happen at all. Any man who steps up to the plate and says, that's my kid, I want to be there, I want to help raise, support that child, he should immediately have that privilege and that right. We shouldn't have to sit and pay lawyers and go in front of judges and have other people who have no idea what is going on in our personal life, the life of his mother, his life. They have no idea what's going on, but yet they're allowed to come in and tell us how we're supposed to do it. No. I believe as two consenting adults, we should sit down, talk, figure it out amongst ourselves. If we can't do that, the Good Dad Act is there to help make sure that we as fathers have that ability. And that's what I'm here today to talk to you guys about. It was very hard that 1 year without my son. The kicker of it, he lived less than a mile from me. I couldn't go to his house. I couldn't see him for his birthday. I couldn't give him Christmas gifts. I couldn't do anything. My own mom had to video chat with his mom, take screenshots and send them to me so I can see my son. That's not okay. So I'm asking you guys today to please repeal the Georgia State legitimization law and please vote in the Good Dad Act, because that is the bill that will actually help heal our families in this country, starting with Georgia. There are 4 states that have passed it already. With North Carolina on its way to passing it or something similar to it. We as a nation need to get back to allowing fathers to be fathers again and not pick and choose when we're going to let them be fathers. I mean, that's all I really have to say, other than 4 days a month, that's 26 days a year out of 365 days. Is that enough parenting time for you? For you, sir? It's not for anybody. And any real father would see that. Howard got emotionally upset. I was emotionally upset just sitting there. I am furious, shaking with nervousness and rage that we even have to come here and fight to be a father. It's a fight I will die for. I will stand on this hill until I'm old and gray. I don't care. My son is my life. Since I was 15, I wanted to be a dad. I got the chance when I was 28. I'm 33 now, and I still have to fight. I'm sorry, that's not right. That's. I'm just gonna end there. God bless. Thank you guys. Thank you, committee members.
Mr. Pryor, one quick question. Where are you in the process?
So we went through the legitimization process. Right now, as I said, we're on a temporary court order. So we have to go back for the final for it to be cemented. But right now we're at 2 days every other weekend and video chats with them every night between 6 and 7. I'm a FedEx driver. Chris just randomly picked me to be an advocate for fathers because when we left court that day, because I had Chris come with me, we stopped outside the court. I looked at him. I said, Chris, if there is any way I can help prevent what happened to me to other fathers, I want to be involved. I don't care if it's just town, local, state. Now, we as a nation need to change these laws, starting with our own state, and we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanjana A.
Appreciate it. Coming from the heart. Good job.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time and attention to this very important issue. My name is Sanjana A. I'm a devoted father of two, husband, son, celebrated community servant for over 33 years. My nonprofit celebrates 20 years next month. I'm a den leader at the Boy Scouts. I'm also a social policy researcher focused on healthy family outcomes. And I volunteer as a policy lead for Fathers Matter ATL, where we train advocates to lift up the needs of their children and our children and families to policymakers like yourselves. The past two speakers that you just heard are from that program that benefited from that training. I'm here because as a practitioner and researcher and a father, I've seen firsthand the harmful impacts of Georgia's legitimation law. I've personally gone through the process twice, once uncontested and once contested. This law has forced me to parent and advocate for my children under extreme duress. To be clear, Georgia's legitimation law is state-supported parental alienation, and it needs to be repealed. Alleged criminals are supposed to get the protection of the law and be considered innocent until proven guilty, but fathers in Georgia do not have that protection in many cases. I began my legitimation process in 2020, and I'm still in this process of being able to get fair access to my son. Right? After 5 years and more than $50,000 in legal expenses, my son continues to suffer from court-enabled parental alienation. He went from daily contact with me to enduring years where he had no contact for over 265 days a year, and only significant contact was 26 days a year, as mentioned by Cody. Even now, he still does not receive his daily phone calls despite them being court-ordered. The impact on him is devastating. 2 weeks ago and 2 days ago, this past Monday, my son said he doesn't want to live anymore. That's the impact of the legitimation law on our children and families. For 5 years, he's been trying to say the same thing. I've cultivated in my 47 years a very specific set of skills, right, to deal with black boys, to ensure their ability to survive and thrive. I work with them in educational systems and programs for the majority of my career, yet I cannot provide these skills to my son in 26 days a year. I cannot provide these skills to my son, and he's suffering as a result. From a research perspective, we know that children thrive when both parents are consistently involved. Father engagement improves educational, behavioral, health outcomes. You've heard a lot of great statistics over these past three sessions. Georgia's system creates barriers that disproportionately harm low-income fathers and fathers of color, fathers like myself. It's so lengthy and costly. I am facing a huge financial burden and facing, I can't even explain to you the financial burden that is impacted on how I'm able to provide for my family. $50,000, most of us don't just have that to just drop on anything. And this is a very important issue, and so I'm willing to pay whatever it takes and go as far as I need to go. However, the burden on me and my family is immense. And it affects my ability to provide for my other child. It affects my ability to take care of my elderly mother. It affects my ability to do all the things that I need to do as a family man. This law also fuels family conflict. Instead of promoting co-parenting, it drives parents into adversarial legal battles, increasing stress and instability. Too often, this escalates into cycles of conflict that harm children. Repealing this outdated law would reduce unnecessary litigation. It would also save Georgia a significant amount of money. Importantly, repealing this law would also help Georgia address domestic violence and child safety. Research shows children and caregivers are safer when fathers are positively engaged and held accountable as legal parents. By excluding men through legal barriers, we increase instability and resentment while reducing accountability. Recognizing fathers as legal parents at birth would strengthen family bonds and also giving courts clear authority to intervene when violence or neglect occurs. Georgia can also look to solutions like we mentioned the Good Dad Act, which grants equal parental rights to unwed fathers who establish paternity and engages them in their children's lives. Georgia could adopt a similar approach once paternity is legally established by birth certificate, DNA, or acknowledgement. Fathers would automatically share custody rights. This reduces conflict, supports children, and still allows the courts to act in the best interest of child safety. In closing, modernizing Georgia's law by repealing the legitimation requirement would promote child safety, reduce family conflict, improve co-parenting, and ensure that every child, regardless of their parents' marital status, has the opportunity to benefit from the love, guidance, and accountability of both parents. This reform would strengthen families, save the state money, and help Georgia address critical issues like reducing domestic violence and improving child well-being. I'm currently developing a proposal for Georgia to help repeal legitimation, but it's a version of the Good Dad Act that's specific to Georgia. I would be honored to share that with you as the committee advances work. I've got a lot of, more than we have time to share here, a lot of insight in terms of the research that I've done with fathers and families over the years that I think would be helpful to account for in any legislation that you're coming up with. I've seen it, for example, even in terms of the homelessness issue, a lot of programs I've done with those who are unhoused, a lot of men basically have fallen out of society, and the trigger or break happened when they were separated from their families, right? The mental health burden on fathers is immense, as you can see from some of the testimony that you've heard today on myself, right? I teach yoga, meditation, and I pray consistently. This has been the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I don't know how fathers who don't have the skills that I have even make it. I can see how they end up losing their minds and go crazy, right? I can see it. I've seen it in my work. I've seen children commit suicide because of parental alienation in some of the programs that I've worked with. Like, this is a real issue, and now I'm facing that with my son. I have the skills to help my son, but I'm not allowed to because of the time. Currently, the bias, the social and legal bias, is still a barrier even in my own situation. The guardian ad litem in my case recommended that the child be with me, and although Title 19, all the things that judges can consider legally is there, we still have a significant amount of bias where judges don't follow the law. And that's a really big issue where judges, because of their bias, even break the law. And so it's under appeal. And so that's even more money to have to fight for doing what I know is best for my child, that my child has been crying for 5 years. Legitimation prevents those children's voices from being heard. It prevents those fathers who really want to advocate for their children from doing their God-given right to protect their child and advocate and be that 50 or sometimes even 100%, right, of the protective factor that a child needs to survive and thrive. If we want our children to survive and thrive, we need to make sure that fathers have 50-50 custody so that at least that child starts off with both parents at the table with the access to be able to protect that child. So, thank you.
Mr. Iyer, your testimony is very, very helpful. We would certainly welcome any and all information you can provide, and maybe Brock Perry, can you help us figure out the best way to bring that information together for us? Let's get you with Brock to provide that. Would you talk about the uncontested versus the contested? How did that uncontested process go for you?
So uncontested was literally a 10-minute conversation with a judge, and with legitimation, I thought I had rights based on being on my children's birth certificate, and then I was rudely made aware that I absolutely did not have any rights. In the uncontested situation, I asked the mother to, go through the legitimation process with me to sign off on it. We had been co-parenting. That child is 16 years old. We've been co-parenting her whole life successfully, no issues. And that was a 10-minute conversation with the judge, but because I didn't know how to structure all of the parenting plan information, legally, that mother still has all of this decision-making power
and the judge just gave the mother that without any, just as a standard rule, versus having us share it, even though we were coming together to say we want to do this together. We don't want, to be in a situation where we're adversarial. We want to put this parenting plan here, and the judge still went ahead and did the mother having all the decision-making power. So that bias was still involved in that process, but it was a 10-minute conversation, and we were gone. We co-parented well.
So do you feel like that was kind of treated like a default, if you will, because you guys didn't address that? The judge fell into the position of, well, let's just give it to the mother. Like that's
Absolutely.
And it wasn't even spoken upon. It wasn't even stated. Just
It wasn't
a
even
default
stated.
decision.
It was a default decision. The judge literally said, "Oh, you guys are in agreement." We of course didn't get the order that day, but when we got the order, that was what was on the order, even though there was no information saying that one parent or the other should have all decision-making power. It was the default to just give it to the mother.
Right, and theoretically, the way that's supposed to work is it's supposed to be a weighted consideration.
Right.
The best interest of the child, which is the legal standard that guides that, should have some play in there, and it just shouldn't be a default decision. And Mr. Chairman, it's because of his testimony has me thinking now whether or not that needs to be looked at through maybe the Judicial Council or something of that nature to make sure that when our judges are not misinterpreting the application of that portion of the law to where they feel that the mother should be getting default decisions when something is not addressed and is not brought up. So I really appreciate your presentation. Just like the other fathers that we've had here before us today, my folks used to say it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. And I know you much prefer to be somewhere else than here sharing your personal life adventures with people that you just met today. I want you to know that your sacrifice and your engagement is going to go a long way in helping people in the state of Georgia that don't even know your name. A mentor of mine always says that Calvin Smyre, Representative Gloria Frazier knows him very well, but he says that we are called upon to plant seeds to grow trees for shade we will never benefit from. And that's what each of you fathers have done today. You have planted a seed that's going to benefit another dad somewhere down the road one day. You won't know his name, he won't know yours. But your genuineness and your impact and your desire to be change makers is what's going to make that even greater. So thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it. And Mr. Chairman, I do want to take a point of personal privilege to recognize in the room with us now former state representative from Augusta, the Honorable Gloria Frazier, who sits here in the back. Thank you, Ms. Frazier, for your presence.
Okay. Thank you. And
Appreciate it.
sorry, one last thing. In terms of potential policies that come out, we know that legitimation basically incentivizes parents to fight. One of the research ideas that I really would like to get funded and even include in future legislation is what would happen if co-parents are incentivized for working together instead of that relationship being disincentivized, right? So it's something that I'm looking at and would hope to just further have conversations with you about. My goal is to make sure that my child and all of our children don't have to go through what I'm going through and what we see their families are going through. And so any assistance that I could provide, please let me know. I'll make sure I leave my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Harper.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Harper. I'm originally from South Africa, so some people say I'm from the deep south. I've been in the States 20 years, and I've got a kind of somewhat a bit of a unique story. I'm a registered neutral. I'm part of, my colleague Meg, we are co-founders of Equally Present, and we are absolutely committed to the promotion of 50-50 legislation by default, 50-50 parenting legislation by default at the outset, because we know the benefit that it brings to the child. just a little bit about my background. So I've got 2 children from 2 different mothers, one in New York, and I went through the New York process, which was, very different from the Georgia process. And I wanted to kind of share some of those insights because I think that they're relevant. So first of all, my son, I met him when he was 7. Basically, I knew that he had been conceived, but the mother fled. She was offering, she wanted me to pay vast amounts of money to potentially have an abortion. I didn't agree, but the whole thing was basically a setup and a scam. And so that was my first introduction to America, and it was a bit of a shock. She fled the country. She was American, but she fled the country. She then came back. And then she wanted money, hand-me-downs, etc. And I wasn't certain that it was my child. Why I tell you that is because the first day that I had in court, the first day that the judge ordered a paternity test. There was no charge. Paternity tests, I mean, I have to say, I don't think are that expensive. So in terms of a state expense, even if the state offered those for free, I don't think it would be that expensive. It's a swab to the mouth. All 3 people are obliged to do it. Quick, the results come out, and paternity is established. Along with that paternity, I think like the fact of legitimation, like automatic legitimation, would be really, really beneficial in the state. All these stories are terrible that you hear from these men. I mean, I've been through it, but my heart goes out to you. I mean, it really does. You are all magnificent that you're here. So I would encourage that, with paternity, that with legitimation, paternity is immediately established. I came up with this concept, and because you have asked about these, the concept of when the parents are in the birth room or at the hospital, are there opportunities there to capture the commitment that both parents have? And so I put it to you, and I kind of, Meg and I, we think about this, a lot. And I put it to you that at the bottom of the birth certificate, that there's a statement that both parents sign, reading, and this is my daughter's birth certificate, that I, Sydney and Paul, acknowledge the birth of our child, Eden, and our responsibility to love, care, and financially support our child. We promise to uphold the rights of our child to live in a safe and protected environment, to know us, to spend time with us, so that our child may grow up to their full potential. And I ask that we kind of consider adding this to our birth certificates so that at the outset, at the most happy time of that child's life, there is acknowledgement from both parents. And I can give you these examples to share. I think, so in New York, the other experience that I've had is that a guardian ad litem was offered to us by the state. Again, I'm not here to ask for handouts, but I think that there is a massive financial cost to having these children grow up illegitimately without their parents. It is a massive cost, but it's not only a cost in the state of Georgia. It reduces our income. Can you imagine if 65,000 people, 65,000 children a year were becoming educated, were contributing to society, were helping each other? What would be the income that the state could benefit from? It is massive. It is massive. And so we look at the situation from who's going to get the child, but we don't look at it from the perspective of the state saying we can earn billions of dollars through children who are educated, go to tertiary education, have a foundation of who they are, because they know their mother and they know their father. And I encourage us to change these laws to the state for 50-50. Guardian ad litems, I had a fantastic guardian ad litem in Georgia. She was honest, down the middle. She was truly independent. In New York. In Georgia, it was anything but. I had to report her. It is her job and her duty to be independent, but she was not independent. I am absolutely certain she was paid by the opposing counsel, and her findings were absolutely incorrect. And Meg's son and the gentleman over there, and I'm not here, but look how good these men are. Meg's son flies planes every single day with 300 people on them, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He cares for children, old ladies, the elderly, the disabled. He puts them on those planes, but he's not allowed to see his child. That is crazy. Crazy. It's just crazy. So I've got a lot of kind of, my case was like just a brutal, brutal case. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had to fly up for 1-hour visitations in New York. Ultimately, though, and this is kind of a big thing, but I do want to get to the main point. This is a big thing that I want to kind of share and relay to the fathers. Ultimately, my situation is I've actually won full custody of both my children. It's by the grace of God, it's hard work, etc. I tell you that because I want you to kind of keep up the fight. It does change. My child, my son is 20 years old now. He phoned me this morning. I mean, he's like, it's fantastic, it's fantastic. His mother was adamant that I would never be able to see him. But, I persisted and I changed, and I've got access to both my children. And I kind of, our organization is really like, I mean, we want to help fathers, not and give guidance, because these issues are so complicated. Anyway, so these are a couple of the thoughts that I wanted to kind of share. Because I think that this group has a responsibility to do something. You all have responsibility to do something. So one, repeal the current laws, but allow for automate the legitimation through paternity. Make that thing free. I mean, it's like, whatever, $100, right? But the return on investment that you get for $100 fee is like, from the state perspective, is massive. I'd encourage that. Consider the acknowledgement in the birth certificate. I think, somebody suggested the use of guardian, not guardian ad litem, but mediators. I mean, I think mediators are a really beneficial team, because the court is an adversarial system, and it does not help. Family matters do not require or need support, or it's not a fight. There's no winners or losers. There's a debate in families. And to remove that concept is just absolutely vitally important. Mediators should allow that. I would also like to see that the judges order the participation of both parents as an outcome to a hearing. It's like, this is not about you get 50% or you get 10% and you get 90%. I, judge, order you, father, to be in your child's life for 50% of the time, and I order you, mother, to be in your child 50% of the time. I order you to do that. And if you don't do that, you will go to jail for not being present in your child's life. It changes the dynamic. It changes the dynamic. And that is what, a very important concept. It's always about this fight. But I order you to take responsibility for what you created. It's a very different kind of perspective. Those are the kind of the main points that I wanted to kind of share. I do more broadly. So this commission is about the legitimation, but I do 100% support everybody who's an advocate for the 50-50 legislation, or the Good Parenting, the Good Fathers Act, all those sorts of things. Children, we must consider the rights of the child. It is the child's right to know the parents. Many people in this room are looking at this from what is my right, what is the mother's right, and I acknowledge that, because that's the battle that we are put against in the courtroom. But let's look at it from the child's right. The child wants to know the mother and the father. One of the greatest things my attorney in New York said to me, she said, even murderers get to spend time with their children in New York. Even murderers. The fact that you murdered doesn't mean that you can't see your child or that your child can't see you. And that's a very different mindset. Like you know, as long as you're not murdering the child, of course. But the fact is that you know there is no thing that should prevent a child from knowing the father, even acknowledge, or the mother, because like in my case, like there's other situations, but in like the child needs to know that maybe one of the parents isn't perfect. Which parent is perfect? And so through this kind of force, like we must acknowledge and allow and kind of encourage our children to know us as parents. 50-50. That would be my advocate. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this body. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. If there's any questions.
Really grateful for everyone's patience today. We're just an hour over, but I don't think anybody minds an extra hour, do they? It's, we'll go till as long as we need to go between now and the end of the year, for that matter.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you all for holding this hearing. Trying to hold it together here. I feel like I'm being held together with dollar store tape and chewed up bubble gum because it's very emotional. Listening to these fathers express what I hope my son will not have to. My name is Tanya Winters. I am an educator and advocate. I'm an entrepreneur. Been an educator for 30 years, but more than that, I am a mother and a grandmother. I am the mother of 3 amazing sons, and my only grandchild is also a boy, so pray for me. But he is awesome. I was there in the delivery room when he was born, as was his father. We were there as a family. And I, like State Representative Barrett, had never heard of legitimation or any of this until my grandson was born. I became affiliated with Fathers Matters ATL and Fathers Inc., working with the wonderful Ms. Lockhart, doing some lobbying work in DC. But nothing prepared me for what I've heard here today. It has been horrifying and devastating to hear the testimonies. We're at the beginning of this phase, and I don't know what awaits us, but I pray that it isn't this for my son. We have a very good relationship with the child's mother now. But when she gets upset, she withholds her son. She hasn't done it in a while. I pray she's growing out of it. At 58 years old, I've never dealt with this. When we used to hear about illegitimacy as children, it would be whispers. But the children were referred to as bastards, and it was often they were often ostracized. And I see that nothing has changed because I think that's what we're talking about here today, something that I heard whispered when I was a child that has become widespread. A bastard is determined as something inferior, despicable, and born of unmarried parents. And I feel like spiritually we're still penalizing parents for not being able to make a decision to come together lawfully, and so we penalize the parent, the father, and the child for something that is their God-given right to come to this earth and be treated fairly as a citizen. When both of my son's parents could not raise, my grandson's parents couldn't raise him, the grandparents stepped in. And we did an amazing job. He's been nurtured, loved, protected, all the things. One day he fell off of the slide at school. Nothing happened bad, he wasn't bruised, but it sparked me to think about how many times as an educator I had seen children taken out of school and into care. And I didn't even think about it like that, but I thought, wow, that could have happened to him today, had he had to go to the hospital and we weren't able to present that we had the rights. And so that began the process of us working to do that. At the time, both parents, wrong place, wrong time, became incarcerated. Another introductory to a system I didn't know anything about. I have 3 sons who graduated high school, went to college, and we were going happily about our lives until then. I want to speak about the mental duress and financial strain that this law causes enormously on families. Fathers are required to pay child support, yet the same law denies them the right to legally claim their child. How can Georgia accept a father's money but refuse to recognize his role as a parent? When Representative Barrett gave the rough number of about 60,000, and this gentleman also spoke to that, I calculated roughly around $15 million into a system that does what with that money? To your point, how much more could that money, and that's just rough amount. That's the starting point of $250, like the attorney said. That we're not talking about continued $4,000 committed to a process that does nothing but bankrupt emotionally and financially. Research makes it clear that when fathers are actively involved, children do better in school, have stronger self-esteem, and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. We have to just take a glance at Georgia's penal system and wonder how many of these children were benefactors of this law on the front end. This law punishes families instead of protecting them, and Georgia must change it so that children have the stability, love, and recognition that they deserve. From the point of an educator, unless the paperwork is written in 3rd grade English, it's almost impossible, and we talked about the pro se process, for somebody to navigate and to do what they can in this process. Nonprofits are not enough. What are the courts open to in order to, we talk about educating, but we need to be educating young women on what this does to the family structure as well as young men, so that everybody has is making an informed decision. I guarantee they do not know that this is what befalls them. And then when they're pitted against each other in court, it's like the Hunger Games. Then we start, human nature begins to feel like, oh, I have to win this. Not understanding as young women what winning this is actually going to cost. What you're losing at the point of being taught that you're winning something. What are you actually losing? We're losing community. We're losing ground as community. We talk a lot about education. Perhaps we should add something to the health and PE curriculum about what, hopefully not this law, but why they need to be able to have this process and paperwork in order, and how they can go through it on the front end. We're talking a lot about education, but I say one word that rhymes with educate is eradicate. Let's repeal, but let's eradicate this law and replace it with the Good Dad Act. We have so many great actors in this process, but we are harming families with this law. And as a mother, a grandmother, I'm happily going about my life. Again, Mr. Howard said, educator, doing the right thing. I've been a contributor to community. My sons have been contributors to community, not taking away from it. But at what point do we all say that Georgia builds itself on a state of family values? This is not in line with family values. And so I'd ask you all, I'm an advocate. I will see you this session doing lobbying work for this bill, advocating for fathers, being the voice in the room that is sometimes allowed in rooms where they are not. And so I thank you for your time this afternoon. I thank you for everyone who came here to share their stories. I fight the good fight with you, praying that we can do something better this legislative session, and thank you again for your time.
You, sir, get the final word.
Do it? Okay. Better make it good, right? Thank you so much to everyone who's come out today. This has been an honor for me and for the work and for the body of people that we serve. This is necessary work. Thank you for the testimonies. Thank you for trusting Fathers Incorporated with your life and helping you walk through a process that's not fair.
The number for us in 5 years is 952. That's how many fathers have come through Fathers Incorporated since 2020, smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. 650 some odd of those fathers graduated our programs. They committed their lives to a 20-hour curriculum and were successful on the other side, and many of them have gotten custody of their children, improved parenting plans, custody, and then some, like Brother Howard, have committed to the entire process. And on the other end, our hands have been strapped because we can't get them to the ultimate goal that they're trying to get to, which is to be great fathers in the lives of their children. And so that breaks my heart as an individual who has dedicated his life to helping families through strengthening fathers for healthy child well-being, to do all that you can do with all of the skill sets, all of the resources, all of the people that you know, and you still can't get these fathers across the finish line. And knowing that as they hurt unknowingly, their children and their families are hurting just as much. Those are cries we just don't hear. But we do hear them in other ways in the statistics that come as a result of fathers not being in their lives. Those are cries too. You just don't interpret them in that way. I want to close some of the plugs that I heard, and I just want to answer those questions because I did have some answers for both of them. Representative Hefner, you talked about the people who could come against if we just could pass this today. Who would those people be? I think one of them would be adoption agencies, because with a law like that, these agencies would then have to figure out protocol to engage the paternal side of the family in searches for that family to be able to take over and become responsible for their children. Because they don't have to do that now, they can literally walk in, scoop up a child, move them into foster care, and never notify the father that that has occurred. And so that's one of them. The second one would be educational systems, because they too would have to go in and reconstruct their entire administrative process for ensuring that even when a custodial and a non-custodial dad came to the school, if he had the birth certificate in his hand, like the gentleman with that statement on the bottom, they would have to figure out how to engage both of those parents equally. That's a whole culture change for the educational system. The same thing will hold true for the healthcare system, where doctors would then have to kind of figure out when something's going on with the child, how do you notify both the non-custodial and the custodial parent? And then in that situation, who has the authority when something goes wrong to make a decision about a child who's going through something when the family is in conflict with each other?
Mr. Braswell, theoretically, isn't that happening right now, though, for married couples, for children that are born out of marriage? Doesn't the father have that state-given right and legal right to the healthcare side, as you spoke of, the educational side, as you spoke of? Isn't it true that that exists now?
Yes, for married.
I understand your concern, and I understand, and of course, I appreciate you for bringing this out, but I'm not going to be entertaining foolishness from folks that can just adopt their systems to something that we're already doing.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to allow that to be used as an excuse for us making some type of change in this state that's going to help fathers. And we entertain that foolishness too often in this state. And we got to cut that out. If the systems already exist, just expand them over.
Yes.
You know, and folks got to get back in the habit of working again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And that's exactly what we want you to do. That's why we're just stating what's out there, knowing what's coming, but the expectation is that you should do what you're already doing. You shouldn't make excuses for not doing it because you have other motives for not doing it. And then the last one is the space of domestic violence. And rightfully so, there is always a concern that when you automatically create shared parenting amongst parents, that their belief is that you have to eliminate the danger. And we want the danger to be eliminated, but you can't, I always say this, while we understand that 95% of all domestic violence cases are perpetrated by men, not all men are domestic violence perpetrators. Does that make sense? And so you can't blanket all men by saying just because we have this concern, we can now not bring that law into place. It follows the same premise, Representative Reese, that you just talked about. We have to get over that piece of it by being logical about what it is we're talking about. The custody versus rights. We heard 50-50 today. There is a difference between 50% custody and 50% rights. 50% rights don't guarantee you 50% custody. And so there's still a process that you have to go through in order to establish the custody, even when you have equalized the rights. And so that's just another further thought in terms of deepening our thought about that. And then lastly, 159. That's how many counties are in the state of Georgia. Every county has a different legitimation petition form. They have a different thought process about child support. They have a different thought process about fathers. They have a different culture about all kinds of things. And one of the things that we would love to present to the committee, given that this is the last and final one, to really begin to start going around some of the other portions of the state and beginning to host maybe a town hall meeting to have a conversation about how legitimation looks in more rural areas of Georgia. Whether or not we can find and tell the same stories that we've heard today, maybe they might look even different. Maybe they might have a different thought process, and where you all may be stopping here to lean on us and Fathers ATL to call on our representatives and people around the state to get some deeper and more information about what that may look like in other areas of Georgia. And then I said that was last, but there is one more. You talked about when I first came and started to do this work, trying to figure out how many children were born to out of wedlock births in Georgia, found the same numbers, about 20 to 26,000 every year. The way that I found that information was through the Bureau of Vital Statistics, but that was in 2000. So by 2010, that number was about 550,000. If the trend holds through, by 2020, that's 1.2 million, and if it holds true for another 5, it's about 1.7 million children in the last 25 years that may or may not be legitimized, because that's the next thing. Once you know the number at the end, then the question is, how do I find out of that 1.7 million children, how many of them were legitimized through the process? And we have to, that's an administrative piece that we have to tighten up in order to be able to tell the story going along, so we actually know how many children we're dealing with in the state of Georgia. So thank you again. Again, it has been an honor to be here to play a part in this. Anything that Fathers Incorporated can do, and I know Fathers ATL, and we're in partnership with them and other fatherhood agencies across the state that are doing this work. However we can lend our expertise, our work, our resources, and our manpower and woman power into helping you guys get closer to a solution for fathers in the state of Georgia. We are open, our hearts are open, our minds are open, and our work is open. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you again so much for following the entirety of our committee and lending your support to our work. But I do have a question. There was a young lady that was here earlier, Ms. Smith, who came and presented her situation with Representative Carlton Howard. In the event that there is a situation where the father is now posthumous, is there a case that you've ever seen that addresses that in a situation like that? Or is that automatically a situation that is now will be set aside for the courts?
No, all the time. We have fathers, and Javin, Michelle could speak to this, fathers where where they have full custody, where something tragic has happened, and the auntie, the cousin, friend, someone is now taking care of that child, and then they walk into one of those systems, the health system, the education system, where they're asked, show the proof that you have custody, and they don't have it. And now they're working with, now CPS is involved and foster care is involved. And so for us as an agency, we typically unfortunately don't know it until something tragic happens, until they run up against the wall and they actually know that now they have to deal with that. But they're no different from Brother Howard. When they walk in, they can go through the entire legitimation process and they could get the child legitimized, but still don't get custody and still don't get visitation time as a result of that. That story hasn't been told enough. We need to tell that deepening story that this is not only happening to fathers, but it is also happening to the families of fathers. And as you heard her speak about and others, when alienation happens with that child, it not only affects just the father, but everybody on the paternal side that is attached to him, grandmama, grandpapa, uncle, cousins, siblings, all of the entire family and community is impacted by that alienation. That answer your question? Yes. Thank you. Okay. I wasn't sure there for a minute. Okay.
Braswell, thank you for the great participation you've demonstrated through this entire process so far, and I know you'll be right there with us all the way through. Gentlemen, anything else for the good of the order today? Representative Hefner, anyone? Final comments, final thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chairman, hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder, but I just want to again thank our Augusta colleagues for this amazing meeting. This phenomenal venue here at Augusta State University, which is one of our universities through the University System of Georgia. This room and this building demonstrates the quality of care and intent that we put into education for our students around this state. We want the best in Georgia, and we know that we have the capability of producing the best and pumping out the best. And it's not just for Metro Atlanta. It's for the rest of the state. So glad to be here with our colleagues. Thank you again to our Augusta colleagues for pulling this together. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership. You have guided us with exceptional leadership throughout this entire process. I know this is our last meeting. Feel a little sad, you know, that we're not going to be coming together as a group meeting with the general public, but I know we're going to continue to work hard and hopefully have some meaningful legislation and dialogue that will lead to legislation where we can do something for the many people that we heard from around this state, from Atlanta, from Columbus to Augusta. It's extremely clear that we have challenges with our current legitimation process with the state of Georgia. I think that question has been sufficiently answered. Now the question is, how do we move forward? What do we do, and what changes can we recommend? And we've been given some great examples that I know we're going to review, some model legislation, best practices that we see happening right now in other aspects of this country and other states. And I'm excited about what we're going to do for Georgia and get Georgia on the right path and give fathers a win. They need a win, Mr. Chairman. And I know that you can guide us over that finish line to do that for the many fathers around the state of Georgia. I have to admit that at this meeting and other meetings, I've gotten very close to tears falling out of my eyes. As a father of a 9-year-old daughter, I can only imagine and begin to try to materialize the pain that these fathers are feeling when they have their children ripped from them and don't have the opportunity to see that child, especially coming from a perspective of a country where we know that one household parents, children of one household parents are many times likely to find themselves intertwined with our penal system or so many other gang activity, drug activity, prostitution, so many other things that many of our young folks find themselves in that could potentially be curbed if there's that second parent there to help. We're not saying that this is that one thing that's going to fix all of our problems. But I think that we have seen sufficient testimony, heard sufficient testimony from experts, from organizations, from individuals that have demonstrated for us that a change in this law, in our legitimation process in Georgia, will go a long way to helping so many families and so many young folks, and just simply instituting the love that should be in parenting anyway, putting the love back into parenting. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone who spoke today. And Mr. Chairman, as we proceed, I'm at your service, sir.
A final word, I'll say thank you to our Vice Chairman for lighting the fuse by requesting this study committee from the Speaker of the House, and a special thank you to our Speaker of the House, John Burns, for recognizing how important this issue is. Just such great feedback today. One thing Mr. Harper was talking, sort of helped me imagine a different perspective of the ripple effect, or how this will expand on the other side when we do start to get things right, what that means overall, and how it ripples through even the very economy in a profound way. But this is a truly bipartisan commission. It's not. This is an issue that affects the entire state and everybody in it. I was at my Rotary Club meeting yesterday, and someone came up and said, "Carter, have you got a few minutes before we leave?" He goes, "I know that you're leading the study committee, and I'm dealing with this issue on the front end of this issue right now for my family and my children." And I thought it's profound, just the sheer number of people that are impacted by this. So this committee we are not going through the motions. We are going to dig in and figure out some meaningful ways to improve things. But just so grateful to be here with y'all, and so grateful to this awesome committee. And there's a lot of time and effort and leadership from one of my mentors, the awesome Representative Smith over here, who's got a lot of time in the chair and helps us all do better. But thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day, and for those of you going back to Atlanta, good luck with the traffic.